Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is indeed my show. Let's bring this a little bit closer. I think we'll see. Yeah. Welcome to the show, guys. I hope you guys are doing okay this morning, and I hope you guys have had a fantastic night or day, depending upon what side of the globe you're on. I'm not going to be a global chauvinist. I want to thank you all for your best wishes. I was obviously not here yesterday. I had a tumble over the weekend. I have to be honest with you, I should have taken the day off also. Being upright is kind of torturous right now, but we are in it. So we're going to stay on this roller coaster for the very least today. Thank you for all your best wishes. I really do appreciate it. I got up too fast. I have a tendency to try to measure when I feel my blood pressure dropping. And if the measurement is right, 99% of the time it is. You just kind of push your way through it. This time it was not correct, and I hit the floor. I think I hit my head on the way down. I think I snapped my neck. The head injury wasn't even the worst. What's more painful is kind of shooting pains to my neck. Nevertheless, it will pass. That stuff always passes, and I can't do anything about it anyway. So we just move forward. I had a X-ray. The X-ray didn't show anything broken or anything like that. The hospital in Jakarta, that particular one didn't have a CAT scan. And I got to be honest with you, I was in a lot of pain, so I just wanted my meds and to get back to my hotel. So no, I wasn't going to go to another hospital. But I'm lucid, no weirdness, world is great. This is just blunt pain. I am on the doctor prescribed pain meds, which is always nice. And we'll go from there. So I am loaded to bear for this particular show. But so far, so good. Everything is fine. So once again, thank you for your kind words. Interesting things have taken place while I was away. Obviously, Donald Trump went to Sharm el-Sheikh for an award ceremony for the peace deal that everybody's pretending that it is. Everybody and their mama around the world knows that this is not a peace deal, but since we're all pretending, fair enough. You have people in London pretending to be kings and queens. So fair enough. If we want to pretend that this is an actual deal, okay, we can pretend it's a deal. I don't, look, as I've told you before, I was conflicted about this, and maybe I shouldn't be conflicted one way or the other. The thing that conflicts me has to do with the belief that this is not a real deal. That we've been here before, that the Trump administration once before has done this thing of, hey, I got a deal. Am I not great? Am I not awesome? Are you not entertained? And then, of course, after Israel arrested, rearmed, reloaded, etc., they went back on the killing spree. Now, maybe world leaders believe that because they're going through the formality of signing something, that this has more stick-to-itiveness associated with it. Maybe. I don't know. I do know that Israel is already talking about, once we get our hostages back, we're going to effectively move forward with the next phase of this. It is also possible that they want this to be settled while they go after Iran, thinking Iran is the major issue. I have no idea. But what happens with Hamas is like we're not giving up our weapons. Or what happens when Israel violates the deal and Donald Trump gives a blind eye to the fact that Israel violates the deal, which is what it has been during the Biden administration and what has been doing the Trump administration up to this point. So unless this is going to be something radically different than prior, then my cynicism is intact and it's warranted. And so should yours be. The other thing that took place or is taking place as we speak, this, Madagascar. And you know what's ironic? Every place that I've been looking at going has either had a revolution, quote unquote, earthquakes, or whatever the hell this is. What you're looking at are protests, or let's call it celebrations in Madagascar. Why is Madagascar celebrating? Madagascar is celebrating because the president of Madagascar was carried out on French military aircraft out of the country for his own safety. There have been protests in Madagascar that have been taking place over the last several days. And the president has called it a coup. Mind you, the president got in a coup several years ago, but put that to the side. He eventually won an election, but beginnings matter. But he gets taken out. Now, apparently, all of this shifted for him at the point where a military contingent decided to agree with the protesters, in which case, I guess he thought that his lot in life was not necessarily at its best. And he worked with the French to get out of Dodge. French gave a notice saying, look, our military is not getting involved. We are not engaged in this. We just got the president out. That's it. We're leaving you to your devices. I have no idea what just happened in Madagascar. I have no idea whether this was organic. I have no idea whether this was some kind of color revolution. I do know a large number of people apparently came out. There were fuel cuts, electricity issues, etc. Meaning Madagascar was having all sorts of internal, economic, etc. issues. At least that is the veneer that is being put on this as to the rationale for the people to get engaged. Here's the catch with protests, though. Two things can be true at once. Oftentimes, there are domestic issues that the people are galvanized around and that they're pissed off about. And oftentimes, even a miracle needs a hand where, let's say, nefarious actors give it a bit of a push. Give it a bit of a push. I don't know. I just was paying attention to this over the last few days, and I really was only paying attention to it because I had thought about going to Madagascar. Oh, well, I guess that plan has been kiboshed. There's that. I'll look into it further, figure out what's actually going on and what's actually taking place. But needless to say, the president has been, Reuters is saying removed. I don't know if they mean just removed from the country or removed from office. I haven't seen any of the reporting that said he's been removed from office, but it's very possible that this just happened, in which case the reporting hasn't caught up with it yet. Keep an eye on it. It's interesting. Nonetheless, all of these countries are apparently being caught on fire. So there's that. One last thing before I get to my guest. My guest will be on, in a couple of minutes. Christina Amanpour. Christina Amanpour. Boo, this is a bad look. This is a very bad look. I'm going to play this clip, and I want to get my take on this clip. This is a very bad look.
For Israeli families whose loved ones are finally being returned from 2 years of horrific Hamas captivity, and for civilians in Gaza who finally had a reprieve from 2 years of brutal and deadly war. I noted that for the hostages who are finally home, it'll take a long time for them to recover mentally and physically. But I regret also saying that they might have been treated better than many Gazans because Hamas used these hostages as pawns and bargaining chips. But that was insensitive and it was wrong. From speaking to many former hostages and their families, like everyone, I've been horrified at what Hamas has subjected them to over 2 long years. They've told me, as you've just heard, their stories of barely being able to breathe in the tunnels, not being allowed to cry, being starved and made to dig their own graves. And of course, today, some of the hostages are coming back in body bags. Now,
think about what she just said. Think of, honestly, just sit, just for a moment. Just sit with what she just said. She said, for one, it's not a war. It's not a war. You had Israel with tanks, military equipment, bulldozers used as weapons, starvation used as a weapon, collective West given all sorts of billions of dollars in regards to military equipment and everything else in order to murder predominantly women and children. That's not a war. That's something else. They have all of this military equipment with all of the assistance from the West against a resistance movement. That's what it is. She points out, I was insensitive and I was wrong for saying that the situation for some of the hostages are better than the situation for the people that Israel has captured. Because, of course, Israel has tens of thousands of people in their jails, doctors, lawyers, children, etc., people who haven't been charged with crimes. And she says, I thought that the situation for, the captives of Hamas was better off than those are in Israeli jails. However, that was insensitive of me, and I was wrong. And after having a conversation with some of the people, Hamas made them dig their own graves at one point. Hamas starved them. They couldn't breathe in the tunnels. I realized, this was so bad. This was so bad. So I was being very insensitive. Are you out of your effing mind? How do you come to an assessment where Israel ritually murders hundreds of thousands of women and children, not to mention old men and people who had nothing to do with anything? They blow up and destroy every building, every hospital, just mass slaughter on a mass scale where they are committing genocide by every metric of every organization that is not named Israel. How do you come to this assessment? We watched Israel rape a man on live TV with the majority of the population saying that's fair game, with the people literally rescuing the soldiers that did it. The torture prisons that they have in Israel, meaning they don't even see these people as being human. And your response to this is, well, I spoke to a few Israelis who were hostages and they couldn't breathe in the tunnels and they couldn't eat. Is it possible that they couldn't eat because Gazans didn't have food to eat themselves? Did you speak to any of the people that were in the prisons, those torture factories that Israel calls prisons? Did you speak to them to figure out their reality, their life? There's been plenty of articles written about it. I don't understand. These two things are nowhere near equal to one another. Whoever told you to give that story, you should have quit on the spot. And as somebody who did media, who nearly was fired from my point of view on this issue, you should have quit on the spot. That's humiliating. That's deeply humiliating and frankly offensive to the tens of thousands of people, not to mention that were murdered. You're making a mockery of their memory, for one, but also all of those people that were in those prisons, those torture factories that you somehow minimize because some rando Israeli couldn't breathe. The overwhelming majority, over 90% of the population, agrees with everything that Netanyahu is doing. They're not innocent. Let me go to my guess. It's just outrageous. It's just completely outrageous. Serenity now. Jeff, welcome to the show, man. How you doing today? You doing all right?
I'm doing well, Jamal. Good to hear you're feeling better.
I'm in pain. I am in a lot of pain, but it's okay. It'll pass. It'll pass. Just to give a heads up, Dr. Jeff Rich. Dr. Jeff Rich is a historian, author, retired government official from Melbourne, Australia, with a PhD in history and over a decade of experience or decades of experience in government. He created the Burning Archive YouTube channel and Substack, where he shares commentaries, book reviews, interviews on world history, culture, and politics. Jeff has written several books, including 13 Ways of Looking at a Bureaucrat. Welcome, Dr. Rich. I'm glad you could join me, man. I really am.
Really good to join you.
I watched Donald Trump at that, I was about to say award ceremony, because that's what it felt like for Donald Trump, because he was just hamming it up the entire way through. There's so many embarrassing moments at that ceremony. One, for example, and I can't tell if he thinks his audience is that dumb when he says stuff like this, but listen to this, and I want to get your take on this. This is Donald Trump when he's signing, he's in Sharm el-Sheikh. Beautiful vacation resort. Listen to what he says here. That's the big here.
Okay.
I suppose this is him signing the peace agreement.
It seems to be a big American ritual.
1,000 years to get to this point. Can you believe it? And it's going to hold up too. It's going
3,000 years.
How long did he say? 3,000 years.
3,000 years. 3,000 years to finally get to peace in the Middle East.
So that takes
and
us to 2000 BC.
Yes. Yes.
No, 1000 BC. 1000 BC.
Years.
Yes.
Dude, I can't tell if his supporters believe this stuff. Like I've seen some Trump supporters like drunk and screaming, Trump is saving America and stuff like that. And I think to myself, okay, that guy maybe believes it. But they can't be this dumb. They can't be this dumb. Give me your take on this.
Well, I saw his speech and looked at the sort of transcript on the roll call website, and he does say that he says, I've heard it's somewhere between 500 and 3,000 years. 3,000 years would put it at 1,000 BC, and apparently there were big posters in Israel celebrating or making a connection, I think, between Donald Trump and Cyrus the Great, who was
Yes, they were.
an early Achaemenid Persian emperor who sort of kind of via conquest sort of unified the Middle East really for the first time. But that was, I just checked the dates just earlier, there's not an awful lot known about Cyrus the Great. That was 560 BC. So I don't quite know who Donald Trump's historical advisors are. Of course, 500 years ago would be, what's that? That's about 1520 or so. So at that point, you know, the Ottomans had taken Constantinople and were controlling most of the Middle East. So it was, you know, I think, you know, reasonably peaceful there for, you know, a couple hundred years, of course, until, you know, European colonialism arrived. British and French fought over Egypt and et cetera, et cetera. So it's just crazy. But I feel the best way to interpret Donald Trump these days is he has two great skills in life. One is signing documents in big Sharpie pens, and he does that, you know, so he signs his executive orders and he signs his peace deals. And then the other one is he does Trump rallies. And when you actually look at the nature of the performance and the structure of his speech at the event in, I'm not quite sure where it was, you said it before, but around the Gaza peace deal, it's basically a Trump rally, basically. He sort of comes in and throws out a few boasts about how great he is, and then he kind of does the call out to all the important people in the crowd, and, you know, says, come over, Keir Starmer, and, you know, doesn't Georgie Maloney look great, and all this sort of thing. It praises his own staff. And it goes on for about half an hour, and after about half an hour, he actually says something of substance, you know, for about 30 seconds, and that's it. And it's comical, frankly, just how incompetent and how unmatched to the gravity of the issues that it really is. So it's quite sad, but comically sad. It's just I think I've made the decision that the only way to really respond to Donald Trump is to treat him as the greatest political comic of the 21st century and not to take him too seriously.
Problem is, Jeffy, it's nukes. And like everybody plays along. That's the wild.
Yeah.
Look at this. This is another thing that took place. Here's like, it's amazing to me how European leaders allow themselves to be humiliated by Trump in this way. Like they jump up and down whenever Trump calls them. Macron, Keir Starmer got caught with this. Take a look at Starmer here. Starmer seems happy as can be when Donald Trump calls his name.
United
Look at him the
Kingdom.
moment that Donald Trump
Where's
dismisses.
United Kingdom? Where's our friend? Come here.
He's so happy.
Is everything going good?
Very good.
It's very nice that you're here. These people all came and like,
Look at that look. Look at that
Yeah.
look. He's like, what the hell just happened?
Did you notice this gesture? He was sort of kind of gripping his forearm really high up, and because I watched it, and he was doing that sort of gesture for quite a while before that, and he looked really uncomfortable. And then
Oh, you mean
Georgia
Summer?
Maloney, Georgia Maloney, who's kind of a couple of doors down.
Yeah.
I think this incident with Keir Starmer happens just after the Pakistani Prime Minister, sort of inserts himself into the order of proceedings, and says Donald Trump really ought to have won the Nobel Peace Prize,
Oh
and
God.
everyone's looking a little bit uncomfortable, and Georgia Maloney literally does this,
Well, she's not good at hiding her expressions. Like she's very
and thank
open with her.
goodness for that.
Yeah. But watch Starmer. Starmer's not good at either. I'm completely
Where's
for her.
Yeah.
United Kingdom? Where's our friend?
He's very happy.
Where?
Oh, the president has contacted me. Let me come
Is
up here.
everything going good?
Very good.
It's very nice of you here. These people all came in like
Just dismiss.
20-minute notice, and I think it's fantastic. And we have so many others, and it's just so many.
He
Well,
was so
look,
happy.
I am going to give. I'm going to give an alternative interpretation, which was
Please.
Keir Starmer was watching this whole weird performance from Trump, thinking, "My God, this is just bizarre." The Keir Starmer things happened. The Pakistani Prime Minister thing had just happened. Keir Starmer has literally just come up from a sort of summit meeting with Narendra Modi, and there's significant tensions there. Pakistan's literally just bombed Kabul, and Keir Starmer, I felt, was sort of awkwardly trying to sort of read, well, what the hell is Donald Trump asking me to do now? Because it was a really just weird, chaotic performance from Trump. There was no sort of structure or it wasn't like he had something important to say and he said it clearly and directly and sort of said it and got on with the business. It was just this meandering sort of thing that was praising various people and saying how pleased he was about the airport, the airplanes that were accompanying him, and how rich all the leaders were, and all this sort of thing. So I don't know. I would give. I know a lot of people have interpreted that as humiliation, and I think there is an element of that because I think Donald Trump can't stand in a room with another person without trying to exert his kind of physical dominance over or psychological dominance over them in some way.
Yeah.
And it's just a reflex of instinct. But I think everyone standing behind him knows that as well. And it's sort of like that. They all know that's happening. And it's sort of like, well, you're not going to challenge that in the moment either. You just have to somehow awkwardly handle it. It's a difficult thing.
I know you said this is weird. This is normal. Like I don't know if you guys see it in Australia, like we see it in the States. This is every day.
All day. We get it all the time. Yeah.
Every press conference, like he would have like these governmental meetings, and the entire meeting is just people saying, "Sir, you smell fantastic this morning. I just wanted you to know that." And then they move to the next person and it says, "Sir, you've done such a great job. I can't believe they didn't give you the Nobel Peace Prize." And there will be the entirety of it where they go around the round table and each person just tells Trump how awesome he is. It's so bizarre. And so when he gets up there and he does this on the world stage, I know people outside of America are like, what is wrong with him? And for us, it's, you know what it is? It's kind of like having a bad child. And you take that bad child to the store, like in Toys R Us or something like that, and the kid just flips out. And the parent just stands there. Now, from the parent's point of view, well, he's not that bad today. From everybody else's point of view, that kid is out of his mind. That's what Trump is to America. Like we see that, we just think that's humiliating, but that's Trump.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty embarrassing, I think, and I think it's easily manipulated. And you see, this is the thing. I think a lot of these immediate signs that people are interpreting as humiliation and Trump asserting himself, etc., is people who know they have to play along and are doing that, but they're not really playing along. I mean, like I've been a government official, and one of the things you have to learn as a government official, particularly with the political leaders, is you need to if you're going to challenge or question something, you need to do it in a certain manner that is appropriately deferential, but not too sycophantic. So it's a really quite delicate little
balance.
acting performance, if you like, where you never quite openly say to Donald Trump, "You're a fucking idiot." Oh, sorry. Sorry, I hope you don't get demonetized because of that.
You're fine.
Jamal.
You're fine. It's like you have to thread the needle in the way that you do, and it's inelegant at best because you don't know. Like he's one of those people that takes you off balance, and they don't know how to negotiate that. Like you're not dealing with a typical politician. No, I get that.
Yeah.
I get that. Speaking of that, oh please, no, finish. I want to finish.
And it's just so rambling as well. It's just so rambling. So I mean, I just can't see this peace deal really holding particularly. And see, the other thing I would say about this is I also think that the whole, I mean, I would imagine that this event, Donald Trump bringing peace for the first time in the Middle East for 3,000 years,
right.
has been planned since the 20th of January. They've had, because in modern government, what they have these sort of forward schedule of events. In Australia, they tend to call it the grid, which is basically how they want to sort of run the political narrative. The sort of imagery and the political stories that they want to sort of create out of various news announcements and all that sort of thing. And I would have thought that the White House would have been running a grid which, has a series of, and we've seen this, a series of peace deals justifying Donald Trump, getting the Nobel Peace Prize. And we've had the anniversary of the Hamas, the kickoff of the events in Gaza, and this sort of event, like 2 days after the Nobel Peace Prize is announced, it would have been in the diary forever. So I think there's been a plan to get this kind of grand announcement, including the hostage deal, done by this point, so it can be done. And the only negotiation point is really, what else do we need to get in to make sure we get enough people there for it to be a success? So it's a very stage managed thing, but the actual substance is not really there behind it.
Well, what's sad about it is this is the exact same deal. If that's true, Jeff, that's more disgusting. Because what that means is that for all intents and purposes, Donald Trump gave Israel full backing to murder as many people as they wanted, for as long as they wanted, up until the point where they can say, okay, now we got a deal. This is the same deal that Joe Biden turned down. Meaning it's not like Trump got more out of it. This was the deal that was offered to Joe Biden and Netanyahu, both of which turned it down. Couldn't get Joe Biden to move on the deal at all. This was what, 2 years ago, a year ago, give or take?
May 2024.
So that means that for a year, this was just sitting on the table. And they let how many ever 100,000 people get killed, starved, etc. for up until this point. And to make this even worse, even though we're joking about Trump in this moment, do you really believe that those people who are there believes that this is going to last?
No, I don't think so. I really don't think so. And apparently, the Egyptian president made quite a strong speech, actually, in the presence of Trump. And I don't know exactly how Trump responded, but he really talked about the need for a strong, durable peace that includes the two-state solution, all this sort of stuff. And a lot of people might criticise some of these sort of diplomatic phrasings, but it was nonetheless vastly more strong than what's in the 20-point plan. So I don't think they really do think it is going to last. But I guess the question is, how much has Israel's opponents been weakened in the year or so since, or 18 months since that May 2024 deal, and they would have been significantly, I guess. The Hamas has been degraded. I can't quite remember all the events over the last 18 months, but I don't think it's been terribly good for the people opposing what's been going on in Gaza. So it is dreadful. It is dreadful, and a lot of the substance of this deal is about disarming Hamas and delegitimizing Hamas, and all the pretty fuzzy sort of long-term promises about rebuilding and dialogue processes and respect and things like this, which are almost certain to break down at some point, or people will find some reason to justify departing from some point.
Well,
so yeah, it's a very bleak situation.
Israel Katz, ironically named. Israel's great challenge after this phase of returning the hostages will be the destruction of all Hamas terror tunnels in Gaza directly by the IDF and through the international mechanisms established under the leadership and supervision of the United States. On the question is, what does that mean? Well, that means that the IDF obviously has to be in Gaza if it's going to do that. The IDF meaning, A, they're going to be there for an indeterminate amount of time anyway. And B, this sounds like once we get our hostages back, we're going back in. He says this is the primary significance of implementing the agreed upon principle of demilitarizing Gaza and neutralizing Hamas of its weapons. It's funny, Israel has murdered over 100,000 people, and they never say anything about demilitarizing Israel, not to mention have nukes. I've instructed the IDF to prepare for carrying out the mission. So as soon as we get our hostages back, we're going back in.
And there's apparently meant to be an election in Israel next year, I believe. There's the issue of Netanyahu's trial, that sort of thing as well. So yeah, I suspect even Netanyahu's probably playing Trump to some degree. I've given you your big announcement, that sort of thing. You can just blame Hamas when it goes sour, and so it's really it's just, I mean, there's very little good news in it all, is there? It's just very, very sad. I mean, as I understand it, there has been some relief and celebration, and like there's 2,000. I think it's something like 200, like 20 hostages and 2,000. Well, 200 prisoners. Right. It's quite a large number of prisoners coming back from the Palestinian side, which is, I mean, that's 2,000 people who are out of captivity. So, or 2020, and so I think that is certainly a good thing. But I just, I fear that it's going to break down and lead to, further dreadful events. But I guess that's partly going to be a calculation about, military strength, political strength, those kind of things. So.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. Because part of me thought too that part of the reason that they even went with this is because Israel needed time to rest themselves. We need to rearm. We need to, we don't have the troop strength that we really want. We can't accomplish our objectives militarily. So at the very least, we're going to try to accomplish this through other means if we can't do it militarily. Like this is a dodge per se. I mean, obviously Hamas and the Palestinians who are not Hamas, just people, have been getting murdered en masse. Yeah. And so you can imagine the level of pressure that's on Hamas to make a deal, whether they want to make that deal or not. But the other aspect to this, as you point out, as a bureaucrat acting, all of these European leaders were looking for a dodge. Like they were looking for a way as a pressure release valve on themselves. Because you can see what's happening in Italy, where there's like standoffs with the cops like daily over the issue of Gaza, especially when the flotilla was captured and all hell broke loose, where you had all of these protests in the UK, all of these protests in the various European countries. And so these European leaders seem to have been looking for a release valve. We need a way out. We need a something where we can say, hey, look, we're on path to a two-state solution. Please calm down now and go back to whatever you guys were doing before and play your Xbox or whatever and leave us alone. That seems to be what the reason why so many of these world leaders are like, oh yeah, we'll in 20 minutes, we'll show up at Sharm el-Sheikh. We'll make it at that appointment. I mean, for God's sake, Macron's government has literally collapsed. He put a guy back in who had already been kicked out, or at the very least had failed. Like to give this kind of idea of where France is right now. And even he showed up. None of these people have anything to do with this deal at all. They're just there to show their face. And so it's like, okay, well, why are they there to show their face? It seems like they're there to show their face just to show their populations, hey, A, we're relevant, even though they're not. And B, we are a part of something that is trying to get a two-state solution. So please calm down. Give me your take on that. Am I being too cynical in the way that I'm looking at this?
Well, my very strong hunch is this was not organised 20 minutes, on 20 minutes notice, as Donald Trump implies. I just can't actually believe that is.
Well, I'm saying for the European leaders.
A real. Well, I don't even believe it was the case.
Oh, fair enough.
I suspect this date has been penciled in, even if arguably for another purpose, with a lot of these people for quite some time.
Yeah.
The European leaders that were there was Italy, there was Germany, there was France, there was Britain, but also the Spanish leader was there, and Spain has been quite critical of Israel as well. So I'm not quite sure what the motivation there was. Viktor Orban was there as well. So, and I'm not really.
Wait, Orban wasn't there. Orban wasn't there.
Wasn't he? I thought he was there.
Orban was not. Orban was not there. In fact, I have a clip for you on that. So Donald Trump, again, taking the time to humiliate the European leaders, turns around and says, "Where's Victor? Where's Victor?" And he's like, you can see Starmer and all of these other guys like bowing their heads away and everything. He's like, oh, I love Victor. I know you guys don't agree with me on this, but Victor is great. Victor is great. He's doing that explicitly because Orban is not there. And let me find that clip. The clip is hilarious.
Yeah.
Right here. And yeah, he said they hate Orban because he defends Hungary. Well, that's not what Trump said, but this is the Orban clip. Orban was not there. This is Orban. I mean, this is Trump rubbing it in.
Victor, I call him. We have Hungary. Oh, Victor. Where is Victor? Victor. We love Victor. Victor, I call him. I put the little accent on it. You are fantastic. All right. I know a lot of people don't agree with me.
Maybe I am wrong. Maybe I'm wrong.
That matters what you are fantastic. He's a great leader. I endorsed him the last election he had, and he won by 28 points.
Look at Starmer.
He doesn't like that.
Have another election. You're going to do great. And we
Doing the old.
Okay, yeah, I'm wrong. For some reason, I thought Victor wasn't there. Maybe because he wasn't in the camera.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You're absolutely right.
That's the Trump rally thing. He's just sort of commentating on himself, and I call him Victor, the little accent. And he's just backslapping himself because Victor supports him, and it's sort of, I don't know, it's sort of pathetic. But to answer your more substantive question, I'm not convinced that this is a particularly important. They're going there to be in Trump's good books. Okay, They don't want to alienate Trump. They've probably known that this is on the cards for months, and it's sort of like going to your daughter's 21st birthday party. You don't miss it, and There have been significant protests in Europe, but they're not really shaking the foundations of those governments. I don't think really in Europe, are they? I mean, the problems in France, the problems in Germany are more about the political divisions across the political spectrum and the lack of parliamentary majorities and the inability to form effective, coherent governments. And and I don't say this in any way to diminish the efforts of the protesters or the importance of the issue, but I just don't think the protests are that much of a serious challenge to the ongoing nature and the continuity of those governments. So they may well be looking for some sort of safety valve. I think the various states that recognise Palestine, the safety valve was the recognition of Palestine in recent months by multiple France, Spain, Australia, Britain. They all. I don't think Hungary did, but and I can't remember whether Italy did. But I think that was the safety valve for those countries. This event was not.
Well, Italy did not.
Yeah,
Italy did not. Maloney famously did not. That's why they were pissed off.
Yeah. So, and I think the sources of political instability are really other factors in those countries rather than the Palestine issue. I mean, regrettable though that is, but I do think that is the case. And I've been a government official. You do occasionally have protests against the things that you do. In a way, it happens, and politicians learn to be thick-skinned and sort of sit through it.
I'm sorry, you piqued my curiosity on this one. When there's a famous scene with Nixon is at the White House, and he's like, "They're coming to get me, Henry," talking about Kissinger, right? And that was when protests were protests. That was when Nixon thought, "Oh my God, they're going to break these buses down and they're going to come and get me." And there was this belief. Chris Hedges used to say that that's where government needs to be. Government needs to be terrified. That's the only way government functions, is if they're terrified of the populations. And if that relationship is inverted, the population is screwed. When you guys are dealing with protests, does the government feel that pressure? When you are, as you say, a bureaucrat, and there are mass protests and people are fighting cops and people are getting injured. And what is going on in the political space when that is taking place? I'm super curious.
Well, it depends a lot upon who's protesting and whether they are really sort of cutting through in the media. And I mean, sometimes people, it sort of becomes a, if you push me, I'll push back against you sort of psychology. It's sort of like it sort of steals people's will to carry on with things. But I was involved with the alcohol and drug policy for quite a long time. And in Melbourne, a few people in Melbourne might remember this, that, there were the huge COVID protests in Melbourne, where people got sort of shot at and things like that. The way a lot of people, not me, but a lot of people responded to that was it turned people against the protesters. It was sort of like, it's sort of damn those bloody peasants sort of thing. So the idea that, protesting necessarily makes people afraid, I don't think is really accurate. But yeah, there were all these protests about a government decision about sort of closing pubs early in Melbourne, and people were, which was specifically a policy that I was working on. Wasn't something I advocated, but was something I was working on, and people were marching down the street with these signs saying, I want to get drunk at 2 a.m. again. Sort of thing. It was like they were big
It's
protests.
time to get drunk, Jeff.
Yeah, and half the people in our department were sort of sitting at the windows looking down at the march, just going, yeah.
Wait, so just so clear, the policy was to prevent people from buying alcohol at a certain time frame?
Yeah, it was a thing called a 2 a.m. lockout. So it's sort of like you
I see.
sort of close the doors at 2 a.m.
I
and
see.
you had
Okay.
to finish your drinks there.
Wait, just so I'm clear,
But
they
there
protested
was
that in
something that
Australia?
happened. Sorry?
They protested that? I mean, the
Oh,
bars
yeah,
typically close at 2 a.m.
absolutely. Because a few of the pubs said that they to shut down and things like that. So people were
I see.
having signs, I want to get drunk at the tote again, and things like this.
I see.
So it was super controversial. But what really scared the government was at one point, the band AC/DC, they're an Australian band. They did this famous song, "Long Way to the Top," if you want to rock and roll, where they performed the song on a truck going down one of the main streets of Melbourne. And they happened to be in Melbourne at the time of these protests. And this rumour went around because the sort of rock industry was being affected by all the hotels closing. But a rumour went around that AC/DC were going to sort of re-perform "Long Way to the Top" down Swanston Street in protest against things. And that scared the hell out of the government.
Really?
They were really, truly terrified. So things like that potentially have a high symbolic resonance, I guess, with people, that really, I guess, go viral, I guess, in popular terms, that would sort of become a symbolic sort of resistance. And, maybe the Greta Thunberg thing is a bit like that. They can scare people because they feel it starts to create this sort of uncontrolled media reaction. But the other thing is, whenever those protests are happening, there's all the negotiation around the actual practical interests involved. So, everyone sort of knew that a lot of these hotels were actually geeing people up to get out and protest about it because, they had financial issues and things like this. I at least from my perspective, having been on the inside, I feel, Chris Hedges is probably wrong there. The issues still have to be resolved, and that's the same. That's the same thing with the issue with Israel and Palestine. You can get as many people out on the streets as you like. You still actually need to come up with some practical, workable solution to sort of resolve the peace agreement, and people just don't seem to be able to quite do that yet. So all those leaders, I think, are probably just, we've done this rodeo before. We'll play along with the Trump circus. We'll, we'll give him a nice present at his birthday party, sort of thing. Even though we hate his guts, and we will, put up with the drunken uncle sort of saying weird stuff at the party, but we, it doesn't actually sort of affect the nature of our real decisions all that much.
I think it depends.
That's what I think. And interestingly enough, apparently the Indian, and there's been a bit of discussion about this in the Indian press as well. The Indian just had like a bureaucratic official to this event because they suspected it would be the kind of farce that it was, and they didn't want to be subjected to that kind of pressure.
Also, they're not sycophants in the way that
Yeah.
the way the European leaders are. Like, it's a little bit different, especially since Modi has been pissed off that Trump keeps saying that he ended the war with Pakistan and all of this other stuff, the trade things.
Yeah.
I think I partially agree with you, partially, and I want to get your take on my take. if there was a difference in the 60s when you had these violent, aggressive chaos in America. And, Nixon was bombing constantly, illegally bombing Laos, illegal, like the palace didn't even necessarily know what they were actually bombing. And you got people being brought back in body bags. And I'm telling you, in America, when you bring soldiers back in body bags with flag draped coffins, somebody's going to answer for that. And I think that is the biggest disconnect between this, the Iraq War, and what's taking place in Gaza. There are no Americans coming back in body bags, meaning this is not a feedback mechanism. It's just conscience. Does your conscience bother you enough where you're willing to get engaged? Now, etherically, yes, right? Like if somebody just asks you, hey, how do you feel about women and children being murdered? Oh God, that's horrible. I think that's horrendous. And so you would get Tucker Carlson, you would get some of these other people saying, I think they have other reasons for it. The whole Jews kill Jesus thing, I think, is in their minds. But put that to the side. You would get some people who would say, that's disgusting. We don't like that. Now, are they willing to fight the cops over it? Are they willing to throw their bodies where they're getting beat and they lose their jobs over it? No. If this was Iraq, or if this was Vietnam, where your uncle came back in a body bag, your cousin, your family members, your friends, you can see your community. You are seeing Americans dying in a war that the president lied you into, or at the very least that you don't believe in anymore. That's different. And so I agree with you that there are some protests that cut more. The issue with the Gaza stuff is that the other stuff just takes priority. Like in Germany, where they were losing, there was a report that came out that was showing that they were shutting down beer factories in Germany. That's mind-blowing, right? Like they're losing hundreds of thousands of jobs. Okay, well, that's obviously going to take priority over something where German troops are not coming back in body bags, or people aren't losing their jobs. And the same thing is true in America. Italy, maybe a little bit different. They seem to, it's bugging the hell out of them more.
Yeah.
But
and look,
give me a
I think that's right. I mean, and you can see that, I guess, in Europe at the moment, like the Czech election,
Yes.
part of that reaction is, we're sick of supporting Ukraine, the Ukraine war. We're sick of supporting the Ukraine refugees, which is not a particularly noble sentiment, but that's driving people. And or the anti-migrant sentiment, which I think we might have discussed before, which is quite prominent in Europe. The other thing about the sort of late 60s and early 70s, or the protest marches about the Vietnam War, and they were huge in Australia too.
Oh, were they?
Yeah, huge. They were called, I think they were called moratorium marches. I mean, I vaguely remember. I think my farmer was going to them or something like that. But I've seen photographs of them, like big protests, and they were coinciding with a whole lot of other social uproar. This is like May '68 in Paris, the sexual revolution, the sort of women's lib, gay lib. The anti-colonial struggle is very, very strong. Obviously, I mean, there's still quite a few colonies in the late 1960s. So there was, I think, a broader context to it as well. And in addition, or a broader context of social discontent and some utopian thinking, I guess, about social reordering. But also... Hey?
You call it utopian? No, this is the word that you use for it. I'm sorry. Please continue.
Well, I mean, I'm thinking of radical utopian thinking, and like in May '68, that there people would write these sort of slogans on as part of the sort of pitch battle on the streets, and say "Sous le pavé la plage," which means under the pavements, the beach. And I've lost track of my thought. I think I was.
I'm
oh
sorry,
yes,
I
that's
didn't mean
right.
to interrupt.
No, that's okay. It was a nice distraction. I'm trying to come back to the point, but
you were saying that they basically had these big ideas at the time.
Yeah. But the other thing about the reason the war got closed down in Vietnam, etc., was, there was a sort of elite disenchantment with the policies as well. So it's all very well having the people on the streets, but it's also a lot of the political leaders, the senior business people, the officials, the intellectuals, if you like, etc. The elites, who also sort of had a change of mind and had some alternative solutions going on as well. So, and I think that's one of the big dilemmas at the moment, isn't there? At the moment you have a pretty consolidated set of opinions amongst the, let's call them the ruling elite, let's say. I mean, it's not a great term, but, let's say that. There's not, in Peter Turchin's term, the counter elite, or if it is, it's people like Donald Trump.
Yeah.
It's sort of like a comic, farce of a counter elite. There aren't really the people within the institutions, if you like, who have reasoned, practical, alternative answers that are actually workable, and that some of this protest energy could then say, aha, let's do this with Palestine, rather than just protest about it.
Well, I think they just disagree with the protesters. There's a difference. And to be honest, I think part of it too is I have a few rules. Habitual liars lie is one of them. You tell the truth, to end the war. You lie to start wars. But one of my other ones is that protests, the longer they go on, they take on the energy of themselves. Meaning, the longer they go on, the more instantiated they get, the more bigger the things that they want in those protests. It's almost like they get hardened in what they want, especially if they get an energy, almost like a hurricane.
Yep.
And I think part of the problem that they're maybe concerned about also is you may have people who are in a Gaza protests who will fuse with an economic issue protests. So, for example, you may have an issue in France where there's like, hey, we don't like this Gaza issue, but we also don't like this economic issue, in which case both of these things start to kind of dovetail. In Italy, for example, that may be what's taking place in Italy. Why?
Exactly. That may well be the case in Italy. And I know there's a debate about color revolutions and things like that, but certainly the situation in Nepal is like that. There's multiple things going on, and they, as you say, it's sort of it evolves dynamically and a little bit chaotically, depending on the forces, how those sort of forces interact with each other.
Madagascar.
And Madagascar might be a similar situation. I just don't know all that much about that situation. But I do seem to recall hearing in the Indian media somewhere a Madagascar politician sort of saying, we've got the same kind of corruption sort of issues in Madagascar as well. So, and the corruption. I mean, there's corruption.
Everywhere.
There's always a good reason to start protesting against corruption, because it's always there.
Right. Well, that's the rub, right? It's like two things can be happening at once. Like, I don't doubt that Nepal had certain issues, but I also I don't doubt either that there was always USAID, all of these other groups that the US had effectively put money into. I don't think it's coincidence that it's on the border of China. Like, all of these things, if you notice, all of these countries around China were catching fire. You get Pakistan and India. You get Cambodia and Thailand. You get, for God's sake, it's like all of these countries that are around China just so happen to catch fire. And it's like, it's a super coincidental.
Well, in India, they also say it's not a coincidence, all these countries around India. So the Bangladesh, and there was lots of talk about American involvement in the Bangladesh thing, and Muhammad Yunus, another Nobel Prize winner. And there's issues going on in Myanmar. There's the Pakistan, the Balochistan, Nepal.
Speaking of that, please finish your point, because I want to show you something after you make that point, because there's a really good example of something very bizarre.
Yeah, just very briefly on Nepal, I did hear a very eminent Nepalese economist and person who's worked with both the Indian and Nepalese governments, who was actually there during the events as well. And he said that it was a bit like what you were saying, that there were certain things happening, and then it took on a different sort of complexion. There was some quite targeted violence, and he kind of implied there might have been, criminal cover-up type things, but he wasn't fully explicit about it. But he certainly thought there was foreign involvement in some way, but I think he felt it wasn't fully controlled by foreign actors, if you like.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Interesting. Brian Berletic has done really good work giving analysis of that. But as you point out, it's like this stuff is not always exactly controlled in the way that people often like to think it's controlled. That there's a chaotic element associated with it.
Yeah. I mean, there's decades of work on revolutionary crowds. So
yeah,
they're strange beasts.
Take a look at this. So what's ironic, I will be going to Nepal in a few weeks, in a couple of weeks. I had looked at going to Madagascar. Like everywhere I want to go, right? It's something going on. I was considering going to Philippines. They've had an earthquake in Philippines. Again, it's like God hates the Philippines. This is the Indonesian president. I'm not going to say anything bad about Indonesia while I'm here. I've loved it here. It's a great country. Yeah, I've enjoyed it here. In fact, at Malaysia also, I've enjoyed both locations. And I was going to consider going to Cambodia, but the visa stuff is a little bit weird. And the Philippines hates visitors, apparently, because their visa system is insane. But listen to what he says here. They catch him. This is the president of a prime minister of Indonesia. They catch him on a hat mic. President. It's hard to hear, but he's effectively saying it's not safe in the region, security-wise. He says, "Can I meet Eric?" Now that's weird. Let's keep going. He says, "I have Eric give you a call." Trump said he's such a good boy. I'll have Eric give you a call.
I told Harry also. We look for a better place.
We look for a better place.
So is he saying that this is not the place to be talking about this issue?
I don't know. I can't. Yeah. I can figure out what he meant by that, because he was like, "We'll look for a better place," and he was like, "Can I have Eric?" He said, "I'll have Eric give you a call." He said, "Basically, can I talk to Eric?" He says, "Security-wise, it's not safe," and Trump says something to him, and he says, "Security-wise, it's not safe. Can I talk to Eric?" Trump says, "I will have Eric give you a call." Trump says he's such a good boy, and he says something like, it may be like, this is not the right place to have this conversation, so I'll talk to Eric. Maybe that's what he's trying to imply. Yeah. He says Eric or Don Jr. Effectively, either one is okay.
Well, yeah.
That's such a weird conversation.
It is a weird conversation. I mean, but this is this weird oligarchic family sort of aspect of American politics that, I mean, it's not just Trump either. I mean, remember, Biden's, wasn't that long ago? The Clintons, the Bushes.
I know, but for some reason that feels very wild to me, where he's like, "Hey,
this is like, it's in a different league. It's a level of oligarchy not seen for 3,000 years, I think."
But there's one other part to that. He's talking about this in the context of security, meaning the security situation. I could be wrong.
Yeah,
the security situation in Indonesia is not safe. So can I talk to your son? It's like, what?
Yeah.
What?
Look,
what do you need to bribe his son?
I'm not sure. I mean, because the sons have been involved in the various business interests like the Witkoff's sons and all that sort of stuff, also with Pakistan as well. And it was the Pakistani Prime Minister who kind of said, look, had his sort of look at me moment in the middle of this sort of press conference. And has, reportedly been doing various deals around Bitcoin type, cryptocurrency type arrangements with the Trumps. Whether he's referring to that, whether he's referring to the protests and broader security in Indonesia, or whether he's referring to just there is something important I want to talk to you about, but we don't do it on a public stage with a camera pointing at me. And I was a former general of the Indonesian Armed Forces, and I do know about security protocols, Donald. So I don't know, it could be any of those three things. My hunch, just, looking at those little grabs.
I want to talk to your son.
Yeah. So
the
maybe
guy.
there's some sort of business dealing type thing he wants to do. But the son has been quite active with Pakistan. Maybe Indonesia's aware of that. There was significant representation of the various Islamic, states, not in that sense, but the Islamic nations at that event. So maybe he is just doing a good national leader thing and saying, "Yeah, I know how you do business with the Trumps, and that he's here with the sons."
I know how you do business with the Trumps. That's the way I took it, though. Well, because when there's been heavy protests in Indonesia. And I don't know if he's looking at Indonesia. He's saying, well, I've seen what's been taking place in these. I've seen what took place in Nepal. I've seen what take place in some of these other countries. I need to be on the good side of the U.S. Hey, Trump, can I speak to your kid? I know your kid is the business aspect of this outfit. And I know that if I am in good relations with, God, man, I'm in Indonesia, right?
Look,
so
Prabowo was at the St. Petersburg International Forum, sat next to Vladimir Putin at that. He was at the, I can't remember whether he was at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, but he was certainly at the, the military parade. At the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, he said, Indonesia's policy is to have many friends and zero enemies. And, I just think he's just using a opportunity, which he probably doesn't get very often, to buttonhole Trump and say,
I see.
Let's have a discussion about something that's important. I don't know quite what it would be. Australia's got quite strong relationships with Indonesia, not as strong as they could be.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a very significant economy, so there could be any number of things, and especially with some of the deals going down with the Trump family, he's probably just aware of, well, this is how you do business with the United States of America these days. And I'm a pragmatic realist, and
he just seemed very concerned. Like, he's legit seemed concerned, and maybe I'm interpreting his expression wrong.
Look, I'm not sure. Yeah. My hunch is he's probably gently guiding Trump not to talk too openly about whatever it was they wanted to talk about in an open mic situation, because he was looking straight at the camera, and he's a very smart cookie.
Yeah. This is
and Donald Trump had his back to the camera and is,
he wants to talk to me about security. He wants to talk like it. Like, that's the first thing he says on the mic, right? Jeff, thank you for this, man. I always appreciate these conversations. I swear to God, I love these talks. I love your channel, the Burning Archive. I say it every time. I don't do it for everybody's channel. If I like it, I like it. If I don't, I don't. Your channel is one of those that I like, and I learn stuff from every time you have it. And just for the audience, so they would know where to find you. We are joined. You have been listening to Dr. Jeff Rich. Dr. Jeff Rich is a historian, author, retired government official from Melbourne, Australia. With a PhD in history and over 3 decades of experience in government, he created the Burning Archive YouTube channel and Substack page, where he shares commentaries, book reviews, interviews on world history, culture, and politics. He has written 4 books, including 13 Ways of Looking at a Bureaucrat. Jeff, what are the name of some of the other books that you wrote?
Well, I wrote a book of poetry called Gathering Flowers of the Mind, and then a book of essays called From the Burning Archive. It's sort of, I sort of started writing a blog in sort of 2010 while I was a government official, and I was formally not allowed to do that. And so I sort of collected those things together in the book's 13 Ways of Looking at a Bureaucrat, which is the From the Burning Archives, the more history, cultural sort of side of things, and 13 Ways of Looking at a Bureaucrat is more about what bureaucracy is actually really like, and also various writings on government issues, including a few essays on political order and decay in the United States of America. But yeah, so that's
very cool, Jeff.
That's what the book's about.
So cool.
And can I just mention one thing, because I know you mentioned the Nobel Peace Prize in the thing, and we didn't really talk about that, but I did do a video the other day on the Nobel Peace Prize, and my Substack on the weekend also as a bit of commentary on the history and things like that. So people, if they are interested in the Nobel Peace Prize, might want to check out both the video and the Substack piece.
Jeff, you're a fantastic man. Dr. Jeff Rich, you be safe, okay? Have a good one. Or have a good night, I should say.
Yep. Thanks, Jamal. Bye-bye.
Love Jeff. He is fantastic. And another guest that I love deeply in a political sense and in a commentary sense, no shady business in this case, Mark Sleboda, International Relations Security Analyst. How you doing, Mark? You doing okay?
Jamal, I am wounded to the quick. Thanks for having me.
I'm sorry.
An honor and pleasure to be on the show.
It is always an honor and a pleasure to have you, Mark. Mark, by the way, you guys can find Mark on Boosty on Realpolitik with Mark Sleboda, or you could just put in his name. He will come up. That's Boosty. I want to make sure that you understand to get the pronunciation correct. Mark, let's start on the military part first, before moving on to another topic. Petrovsk, Kupiansk, there's fighting in, I think this is called Drovanovka and Seversk. Russia seems to be moving on offense in this case. And Seversk, right. And the fact that there's fighting in Seversk, this was something I think that Gerasimov has said at one point. People weren't able to nail this down, but apparently this is definitely true at this point.
Yeah, almost a month ago already, he said it. Definitely 3 weeks ago. And they were already within what could be considered the city limits of Seversk at that time. And of course, they've only progressed since then. And these are Kupiansk, Pokrovsk, and Seversk. There's fighting all within the city limits, and all are really set to fall. Right? There's no question that the cities will be taken. The Kiev regime is still trying to hold them. In Kupiansk and Pokrovsk, there are Kiev regime units that are at this point encircled. That they have no way to get resupply, to get wounded out, to escape themselves, at least not without suffering egregious casualties in the attempt, which of course has happened multiple times before. Of course, Zelensky-Sersky will never order their retreat or surrender, because that they never have, and they never will in this conflict. So if these troops do attempt to flee, then that's on them. And the encircled troops at this point are several hundred in both locations. I mean, it's not a massive amount, but it is enough that loss of those that are, and there are more troops in those locations that are in extreme jeopardy, extreme crisis, that are not yet fully encircled, because Russia is separating different as they move through the city. They're isolating pockets of defense as they move forward. So both of those are a foregone conclusion. It may yet take a number of weeks to mop up the situations. And in Toretsk and Chasiv Yar, the Kiev regime held on to, fragments so that they could claim that the cities were not yet taken on the outskirts for months and months. If you'll remember, I don't know. I don't think that'll necessarily be the same situation here, because at this point, particularly around Pokrovsk, the Russian forces have advanced so far to the north and in the area around Pokrovsk, moving from south to north, that Pokrovsk is so generally isolated from the remainder of Kiev regime held territory and South Donbass at this point that it will be very hard to pull that. There's a number of other places also important, though, where Russian forces are also fighting within city limits of important settlements, and that is Konstantinovka, a bit further to the north from Pokrovsk, and also Liman, which is it's just slightly south of Kupiansk. It is north of that last Kiev regime defensive line, right? That we've been talking about for more than a year now. And it's Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, and Konstantinovka. And Russian forces are already moving into the outskirts of Konstantinovka in the south. In the north, Russian forces, once they take Liman and then Izum after that, they'll be able to move on Seversk from the north and from multiple directions, which means it will fall, of course, much easier and much sooner, because it won't be, defended to that position. That's why Izum, which is very close to Liman, is often considered the gateway to Slavyansk, right? The way it's talked about in the military circles. So all of these, Russia's not just advancing on one settlement, right? It's not the Battle of Bakhmut. It's not even the battle the way Avdiivka was, already, a year plus in the past. What we're looking at is Russia now advancing all along the contact line. And in other places along the contact line, Russia is also making big advances, simply because the Kiev regime is forced to transfer manpower from other locations to try to vainly to hold on to these, more urban, important areas in the Donbass. And that is particularly in the south, in Zaporozhye, and in Dnipropetrovsk, right? Russian forces are just, there's nothing to stop them really at this point. They're inhibited more by their own logistics and the need to fully secure territory behind them at this point, but they haven't met any really significant resistance. And the Russian forces are already moving on Gulai Polya and Orehov in Zaporozhye region. And likewise on the small settlements in the area in Dnipropetrovsk. Which is interesting because, of course, these are not part of the four regions of, Dnipropetrovsk is not part of the four regions plus Crimea of the Ukraine that Russia has claimed as their own. Moving into Kharkov and Dnipropetrovsk, Kharkov in the north, Dnipropetrovsk in the south. These are two new regions, of course. And then you could also talk about the Russians' still relatively small incursion along the contact line in Sumy. So everywhere Russia is advancing, they made a big deal about Kiev regime counteroffensives in the Pokrovsk area to try to stop the Russian breakthrough north of Pokrovsk. For the last 2 months, really. And they made an attempt, and they played up their attempt to the media and to the Western elite, exaggerating it out of all proportion and success. And its day has passed. There is a tide of war, right? There is a lull and, an ebb and a flow. Always there is an attack, an advance, and a counterattack. That is but their ability to counterattack is now just fading. They just don't have it. They don't have it anymore, and they've wasted some of their best remaining units, right, pulled from other locations to try to make these counterattacks, and they bought them some time. That is all that they did. They bought a limited amount of time, but those forces are already exhausted, and Russia is once again advancing in all those areas north of Pokrovsk, and the counterattack is like so much smoke in the wind, right? It's gone. Part of the Kiev regime's and their babysitter, former General Kellogg's attempts to sway Trump with this Ukraine is winning nonsense involved these counterattacks in the Pokrovsk area, and already we're looking at less than a month, and those claims are quite obviously false, and were always false, and that's the situation. And as much as the ground war is continuing on, and everything is in Russia's, they still have the initiative. They still have, there is no let down in the offensive. It is always ever increasing at this point, right? And we're still in the attrition war, right? So that style, right? That slow advances that focus more on destroying the enemy formations than the focus is specifically on conquering territory. That is still mostly incidental. But the era of the war of attrition in the skies also continues with drones and missiles. A large part of it is now targeting each other's infrastructure. And once again, Russia has the huge advantage here. But we now know through reports, I believe in the Financial Times, that the U.S. has been actively aiding and even directing the Kiev regime's attacks on energy infrastructure in Russia. And this is, they're obviously fully behind this. And this, while they're making the pretense of being some neutral mediator and arbiter, Trump trying to bring a settlement to the war, which is why Russia's not taking his entreaties, at face value. I don't want to say very seriously, because that's not necessarily true, but it certainly is not taking it at face value.
Really?
But neither are they drawing excessive attention to this, because while Russia has always quietly maintained that ultimately the West assistance was, that these long-range strikes targeting oil refineries and so forth, the softer targets, was not possible without active Western assistance. Now it's not deniable, but it's not Russia that is yelling about this, which is, again, part of, I don't know that it's part of the political game that the Kremlin, or should I say Putin, has chosen to play, where he is still prioritizing the possibility of, however fading, of engagement with Trump over, shall we say, a more confrontational diplomatic position, which frankly, there's starting to be some, grumbling within Russia that, this is pointless and actually humiliating, and why are we doing this?
The Nobel Prize thing was deeply humiliating, where Putin gets out and makes. You don't think so?
You mean the who was selected, or the fact that Trump didn't get it?
And Putin said something like, "Well, Donald Trump, basically that the Nobel Prize has no value," which he's right about. And then he goes into this notion that, well, they should have given it to Donald Trump, et cetera. And I'm like,
well, he didn't say that. He said that Donald Trump has made significant efforts at settling. And even when he was talking about peace, it wasn't direct. It wasn't that Donald Trump is bringing peace. And it was that Donald Trump has made significant efforts to settle several long-running conflicts, which I guess through a generous interpretations of threats and blackmail, could be interpreted that way. If you want to sow and shows in enforcing a colonial administration on a defeated Hamas in Gaza, I mean, if that's the way you want to term that, I mean, the Russian government has no particular love for Hamas. Let's make that clear. They have a great deal of sympathy for the Palestinian people of Gaza. But the problem, of course, with Hamas is they have no real friends anywhere. Right? I mean, they fought with the jihadists that now rule Syria to overthrow Assad, and of course, fought Russia at that time. And now that Al Qaeda, ISIS, Al Julani is in charge of Syria, you don't exactly see him running to Gaza's to Hamas's defense, either rhetorically, politically, or militarily, of course. Which anyway, Hamas is what the Palestinian people of Gaza had, and Hamas has been crushed. Even if that required, the genocide, an ongoing genocide of the Palestinian people of Gaza to get to that point, which
I'm just pointing
was
out
always
Putin didn't have to even say that.
No, he didn't. He did not. And I turned around and to my wife, and I just rolled my eyes and made snarky comments about Putin's comments, and said we're still playing the game. I don't agree with it myself. But again, it's not always about direct engagement with Trump. It's not even the belief that engagement with Trump, of playing the game with Trump, will necessarily have any success. There are wider diplomatic, shall we say, elements here. And there's a number of other countries in the global south that Russia wants to keep on side.
Oh, I see.
Right. China's a given, right? But when we're talking India, Brazil, Indonesia, these other, the Arab states, there are broader diplomatic considerations, and Russia has kept them, shall we say, either neutral or, as the U.S. terms it, on Russia's side and trading with Russia by effectively claiming the diplomatic moral high ground, right? And that is always, I believe, a top consideration of Putin's, because it has enabled, despite the existential economic war of sanctions and financial levers of control and everything, that was always the first way that the U.S. envisioned crushing Russia. And the way that has been averted to a very large degree is that the rest of the world refused to stop trading with Russia. And indeed, China and India, particularly India, both massively picked up Russian energy when Europe dropped it. Now, part of that is because they needed to, because global commodities, finite supply, shock to the system of redistribution and everything. But of course, the U.S. doesn't quite see these things this way. They are referring to China and India as the biggest culprits of the war now, as they continue to funnel weapons into the Kiev regime. But the hypocrisy is just, well, of course they mean on the other side, right? That's the part that they don't say. But that is always a consideration of Putin's, is maintaining, the diplomatic high ground because of trade and diplomacy issues. And that's not always easy, understandable to someone who is just, say, focusing on the military perspective and saying, why does Trump, or why does Putin continue to try to blow smoke up Trump's posterior and everything like that? Yeah, and it's a little gut churning, right? I'll admit it makes me a little sick to the stomach. I would prefer a bit of honesty in reply every time Trump throws one of his tantrums and goes off. But there's also the fact that President Putin has set a standard for the Russian presidency, I think, right, in the modern era. And that is, he is unfailingly polite and respectful to the leader of every state, no matter what the current state of relations between Russia and that state. Yes. Which again makes him a statesman, hands and above, pretty much everyone else in the world. But it's not always satisfying to someone who reacts to what the West is doing in Ukraine and beyond, with a bit more of a gut instinct, shall we say. Putin does not react from the gut. Putin reacts from an ice cold Russian intelligence cerebral level.
Do you think that he really believes that some connection between him and Trump was made, like that he was understood in some way, or do you think it's just?
I don't believe that. I believe that he was to some extent fooled by Merkel during the Minsk process, because he had a residual Germanophilia from his time in Germany and so forth, right? It's a disease, right? It's not as substantial a disease as Americanophilia. But no offense, Jeremiah. It's like a venereal disease, basically. I don't believe it about Trump. I think that they have a psychological profile of Trump and they're playing a game. I mean, everyone else in the world is also playing that, with one notable exception: China.
Yeah.
China does not play the game of, playing in Trump's court, if you will, right? They don't play the game of blowing smoke up Trump's posterior. Even Putin does that to a certain extent, I believe. China does not. China never has, and they're never going to. But of course, they are in a position when, in many ways, they're more powerful than the United States now, for at least the ways that it matters, other than nuclear weapons. Right. And they're making rounds on that one too. And that's what we see right now with the trade war redux that is going on, and China is fully prepared. And replying to the U.S. in kind for every slight and insult, and not trying to assuage Trump's ego or his narcissism or his ever present demand for his the narrative always has to be spun in his way, and China doesn't play to that. Right. Putin, for instance, is always careful never to insult Trump and to always try to give him some opportunity to save face politically, because that is extremely important to Trump, and Russia realizes that, and they're in a much more precarious position, of course, not necessarily because of the possibility of military defeat of Russia on the battlefield, but because there's a very slippery slope of escalation to actual nuclear conflict that they have to keep in mind as well. China, as important as the trade war is, and it is extremely important at a geopolitical level, it's not immediately, there's no immediate possibility of a slippery slope from that alone to nuclear war. Right. I mean, there is a broader context where that could lead to that, but it's not the immediacy, of course, of a physical military conflict. But it's interesting, right? There are two principal, well, you could say now that there are three countries of note, right? I mean, North Korea and Venezuela, I don't really count, as major powers. They're not. But Russia is defying the U.S. militarily. China is defying the U.S. economically. And India is defying the U.S., I don't know, shall we say diplomatically, because they're refusing to accede to its demands. And I guess, we could term it that way. But that is a situation that Trump is satisfied in none of those three locations, of course, but doesn't necessarily have the power to change either one of them, no matter what he does. So that when Putin is in, making these comments about the Nobel Peace Prize, keep that. He did say, I'm not the one to judge whether Trump gets it.
He did.
And then it was, and it's not worth anything. So, why not give it to Trump? That was what I interpreted out of it.
Well,
right?
we did say this thing is no value at this point.
Yeah,
What is the point of this prize if you're going to
no
just
credibility, and so why not give it to him, right? That was what I read out of it,
I
right?
just
And
didn't
I
like
still
him
wasn't
going
happy with that
direction
but,
at all. I just was like, why are you doing this? Is not even
He didn't
something
say
you
you literally just bombed Iran after the pretense of diplomatic engagement with them, which is what I would have said. But then again, I don't have the responsibility of a country of 150 million people and a multipolar world order, comprising the rest of the globe at stake. So I have the license to snark and feel contempt for Trump. Putin may not necessarily, have that. I mean, he could, but there would be a cost.
Well, he is meant to death for that, to be honest.
Yeah, he does. He does have the bad cop. He does have.
You mentioned something. You pointed out that Russia is going into regions that are not part of the 4 regions that they were initially discussing. These are 2 additional reasons.
Yes.
Three of them. Something. Okay, 3.
Oh yeah. I mean,
what is that indicative? Is that indicative of, look, we may give deference to Trump, but we don't really have a belief that this.
Absolutely. I mean, none of Putin's game with Trump diplomatically, I don't believe has had an ounce. I don't like it, right? And I will say that outright. I feel uncomfortable about it. I understand the reason for it. I'm not sure whether that is enough, but I understand it. But I also see that all of this diplomatic game has not in one iota affected Russia's goals, strategy, or implementation on the battlefield. That has not been affected at all. I do not believe that I've seen any evidence that that has affected that. And obviously, I mean, you could almost argue the opposite. The fact that Russia has gotten no results through that mean that Russia, I think, is already looking well beyond the Donbass. And an interesting note, Putin met with a number of admirals and generals recently in St. Petersburg and spoke to them. And then he took them with him on a personal tour of the tombs of Catherine the Great and Peter the Great, 2 of Russia's most important historical leaders, whatever you may think of them, and who both expanded the Russian Empire more than, anyone since Ivan Grozny, since Ivan the Great, the Terrible, as they call him. In
Peter's too highbrow.
Right.
He's too highbrow. Trump is not gonna. He's not gonna get that. They're gonna have to give him a color book. I'm sorry. Continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah. He took them there, and I mean, it's really impossible for me to understand that. I mean, it was Catherine the Great who took southern, what is today southern Ukraine, Crimea, which is already part of Russia, from the Khanate, the Turkic allied Khanate, the Golden Horde that was there, and Peter the Great that took other territory and defeated Charles, the Swedish at Poltava, which is also in Ukraine in this great historical battle ending the Great Northern War. I can't see any other reasons for that kind. That was obviously an appeal to Russian history and nationalism and so forth. And I do believe that Russia, whatever they're playing, another thing that must be said is Putin has also made not one concession to Trump in the goals of the SMO either. So again, it may cause a little bit of a nausea seeing him, give a certain amount of entirely unwarranted professional respect to Trump, but it hasn't affected Russia's position via, diplomatically via the SMO. It hasn't affected the battlefield at all. So, we should probably grin and bear it.
No, fair enough. I accept it. But does it?
Yeah.
Well, and I guess there are two questions with that.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's doing that to get across intention, meaning this is him giving this.
I think it's well beyond that.
Yeah,
I think that's what they've already made the decision. I mean, the
does this include
Lukashenko? Yeah, the Lukashenko, the president of Belarus, which of course is in a degree of union state with Russia, once again repeated over the last few days that Ukraine as a state may disappear, right? And that, I'm sure, was a mess. That was a message sent. And I think that Russia's already decided that it will disappear, that they've been left with no opportunity. At the very least, a rump state that will all be left. At the very least, Russia at this point intends to take everything east of the Dnieper, but will probably go beyond that too. East
I never
and south.
figured out how they had a choice otherwise, to be honest. I mean, short of getting
They certainly did not want to. I mean, they did not want this, right? They wanted, all the way back to 2014, they wanted Donbass as an autonomous region back in Ukraine. Only Crimea. Right? That was it. And everything since, they've been forced to take because the West, refuses to accept that they're not going to be allowed to absorb Ukraine into, their geopolitical consolidation of the European continent under NATO and US-led Western global hegemony. They flip that territorially, justly, as they see it, with the 2014 Maidan Putsch events, then it's theirs, and they geopolitically marked it, urinated on the territory. And Russia has always, first, they only objected for 8 long years politically, for the most part, right? And then they gave up on that and launched the SMO. And since then, at every point, they've stopped, and then they've offered terms and made clear that the terms would get more territorially expansive every time they had to ask the question. And we're going to see that sometime next year, probably before the middle of the year, sometime in 2026, sometime by the summer, I expect they will have taken Slavyansk and Kramatorsk and Konstantinovka, and Donbass will be effectively, taken, and they'll turn and they'll say, "Are you done yet?" And think long and hard before you answer, because we're already deep in Kharkov and Dnipropetrovsk and elsewhere, right? And they will move then to take Zaporozhye and Kherson City and probably Kharkov. I don't believe that they'll move for a military, storm of any of these cities. I think they now have the abilities, they now have the manpower, and Kiev has such a deficit of manpower and so forth, that they will then be able to invest these cities, right? To put them under effective siege, and they'll take them that way rather than do the damage to them that would be. They don't want Kharkov to be another Mariupol, right? I mean that is unthinkable, really. But I believe there will be a moment, and it will be a political moment of political crisis in the West as well, because the insistent, outraged, and screaming demand for direct war with Russia will reach a new pitch, right? That will be the crisis moment for the West. And of course, Russia understands that. I think they do. I mean, they'll give the opportunity. Are you done yet? Will you tap out? Will you, whatever, face saving is necessary, but will you admit your loss here? At least, in the terms that we've set forth. And they won't, of course. It's impossible for them to do.
Right.
And then Russia will be forced to move further, right? And then I don't know if there'll be another such moment, but there will be more crisis moments, right? When Russia takes all of the Donbass, when Russia takes Kharkov, when Russia crosses the Dnieper River in force, when Russia moves on Kiev, right? Those, and then eventually, unless someone comes to their senses, which I really just can't imagine, then into Western Ukraine as well. Every one of those, and this will probably last out several years into the future. But at each one of them, Russia, will, I think, in some form or another, re-offer the question, "Are you done yet?" And they never will be done. They'll never accept these outcomes, so they can't, because their hegemony is something that, to a very large level, is built on narrative and belief. And to have the hegemon defeated in this way and admit to it, they will always hold out for a black swan or turning of events in another way, like they did in Syria. And to be fair, it was successful in Syria, because although Russia and the Syrian government won on the battlefield, they then lost the peace. The West never admitted their defeat there. And yeah, they had to let Al-Qaeda take over Syria, but yeah.
It's slightly different. Like, this is not, Russia was dealing with that indirectly. This is direct. This is,
yeah, it was. Well, no, Russian forces weren't dealing with that indirectly. They were there. Russian forces were fighting in Syria.
Yeah, but the responsibility is different, right? I mean, this is not the same.
The level of geopolitical importance is different. That is true, right? Obviously, Ukraine has greater geopolitical, cultural, historic experience than Syria. But I don't think we should be afraid to say that Syria was a big L for Russia.
Oh, it was. No.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying if.
Yeah, you're trying to argue that it's not directly relatable to the situation.
Yeah, right. Like,
I would agree with you. There's a whole host of differences, but is that Russia should, and all of us should, be extremely cautious, because things can be turned on a dime sometimes when you least expect it, in ways that you don't expect it. And I did not expect the Syrian government to collapse in December within the span of 2 days. And I don't think anyone seriously predicted that either.
So everybody who I talked to had this just shocked, radical shock. Like,
shocked me. I could see what was happening, but the buyout of the Syrian military as a result of the hollowing out of Syria economically, but I had no idea that it had gotten that bad.
Yeah.
Why? Because I hadn't been in Syria. But I don't know. Even people who were in Syria didn't see that coming. People who were literally in Syria at the time were shocked by the events. So anyway, all I'm saying is that there is no complacency when dealing with the West, and their belief in that they should never accept these results will almost certainly be, in part dictated by their relative success with that, stratagem in Syria. And again, not without, entirely without cause, without justification. That's what they will tell themselves.
Well, the new thing that apparently is going to change the trajectory of the battlefield are the Tomahawk missiles, because, that's the new wonder weapon that is apparently Donald Trump is continuously threatening the Russians with at this point. Do you really believe that this is a legitimate thing? I mean, I saw a picture, I think it was on Sleboda, where they were showing trucks that can launch them from the ground.
Yeah, a new smaller vehicle-based launcher by an American company has obviously been in development, and they're now announcing that it's ready for mass production. We don't know how many of them they already have. I would suspect, now that it's been revealed, that they probably already have enough to make that transfer. And these systems will be more mobile, and something that they can probably provide to the Ukraine whereas the much larger and more advanced Typhon system that they have only a couple of, was not really practical. So yeah, it seems they're going to go forward with this, right? We've also seen a follow-up article by the Financial Times say that there's only, of course, a limited number of Tomahawks that can be provided because of the U.S. has so many other commitments in Venezuela, which they intend to launch, obviously, a bunch of them. And, always they need a large reserve for the war with China, as they see it. And I mean, Russian, it's like with everything else. We've seen previous such long-range Wunderwaffen with the Storm Shadows, the Scalps, the Attackums, the ground-launched small-diameter bombs, and at every turn they've gotten a few licks in. And then Russian air defense and electronic warfare have built up profiles, and then you never hear anything about these weapons again because their success rate drops to very small, and then mostly at soft, relatively undefended targets. That's why you don't hear anything about the Storm Shadow and the Scalp anymore, or the Attack, or anything
8%.
else. I mean, there was this brilliant title over a year ago now in the Western press that Western high-tech weapons work against Russia in Ukraine up until they don't. Right. And then it's that whole, sci-fi geek analogy that I will insist on, that, it's like, firing phasers at the Borg in Star Trek. You got 3 shots, make them count, because after that, the Borg shields have adapted, and then you're done and you're turned into a Borg, right? That's not that I'm saying that Russia was the Borg, but, that it works for the defensive analogy anyway. Now, it's the same thing, right? Because the Tomahawk is ultimately GPS guided, and Russia has the ability to block GPS signals. And their air defense systems, the S-400, was, to a significant extent, designed specifically to bring down the Tomahawk. The Tomahawk was a good weapon for its day, and it's still a pretty good weapon, right? But it was built in the 1980s, and Russia's defenses are much more advanced. And so, as Putin said, they'll get, they'll do some damage. They'll get their licks in, and then, but that will be it. And they don't have enough of them. Now, what occurred to me just this morning as I was thinking about it, I was like, going into, the shall we say, conquer the world gamer civ zero-sum total war mindset. What would I do if I were the U.S. and the rest of the West, and in the situation where they see themselves, where their intent now is to force Russia with long-range strikes to the negotiation table on their terms, right? That's what they think they can do. That's their strategy now, right? That's what this war against Russia's refineries with drones that has failed to achieve that objective were meant to do. And, so the Tomahawks, they know the Tomahawks are not going to be enough to do that. And Russia knows that the Tomahawks are not going to be enough to do that. And this is Trump's poker bluff, right? He's bluffing. And Putin is perfectly ready to call him on that. What I would do, knowing that the Tomahawks were not going to be enough, knowing that the Taurus provided by Germany in isolation would not be enough, knowing that the Storm Shadows and the Scalps that have been provided to the Kiev regime, let's be honest, that the British have fired into Russia so far,
right?
I would plan a big missile offensive against Russia using all 3 at the same time. The Tomahawks, the Taurus, and whatever Storm Shadows and Scalps the UK and France have been able to produce, in the meantime, right? Because they already went through their entire deliverable inventory. Some have doubtless been produced in the last months, right? That they haven't even tried to use. So I would launch a big missile offensive, right, against long-range targets in Russia, refineries, military targets, lots of things all at once. That's what I would do. Now, that would be a very risky play.
That's what I was about to say.
Russia would be almost compelled to respond, and not directly, not only to the Kiev regime on that. I mean, the voices for Oreshnik's landing at German air bases where NATO is planning all of this out and implementing it would be enormous. But I believe that they're willing to go to that, past that red line, to go to that extent, because they're desperate and they can't accept the results, and they will still hope that Putin will not escalate beyond the proxy war. The rules of the proxy war, such as have been established. That's my bet. That suddenly occurred to me today that would be a more effective use, because using all three suddenly in concert, the hope would be that at least temporarily that would, to an extent, overwhelm Russia's air defense and electronic warfare capacity.
Mark, I have to let you go. I agree. Yeah, that's risky. And look, I guess the thing is, Putin has already said, if they fire these missiles, this is you launching these missiles at me. So regardless of whether they can compensate or not, they're still stuck with the fact that Putin has said that.
But that's actually much softer than what Putin threatened before, when Biden was launching them.
Yeah.
When he said, we reserve the right to hit you back, not the Kiev regime. That was said, and that is not being said now. And that's why there's actually some disgruntlement in Russia that Putin has, shall we say, softened his deterrent rhetoric against Trump, where it was much more direct with Biden.
Mark, you are fantastic. Great breakdown as always. Best in the business. I say it proudly, and I mean it. Mark Sleboda, International Relations Security Analyst. You can follow Mark on Boosty, Boosty. If you put in Real Politic with Mark Sleboda, or just put in Mark Sleboda, he will appear. Definitely check him out. Subscribe to his content. Thank you for this, Mark. You be safe, okay?
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. All right. As I always say, best in the business, and I mean it. Mark Sleboda is fantastic. Mark is awesome. He knows his stuff. And a brilliant breakdown as always. I suppose if you are indeed dealing with the Borg and you get that one shot, you better make it count. But Jesus, that is risky. That is so risky. That is so risky. All right. I am in pain, so I'm going to end this a bit early today. I'm trying to think, is there anything else that I wanted to hit on? I will say one thing. Whether the whole Tomahawk missile stuff, the attacks on Russian energy, I would like to point out that I pointed out, I think like a week ago, or maybe 2 weeks ago when all of this was taking place, that this is obviously the United States that's backing these attacks on the Russian energy process. The reason was somewhat obvious. If the United States is trying to get Europe, supposedly, trying to get India and China to not use Russian energy, then it's a hell of a coincidence that all of a sudden Zelensky and Ukraine, who is effectively pushed in a proxy of the United States, starts to go after Russian energy almost as a specific thing of policy that they're effectively running with. It doesn't take a genius to say, well, hey, they are trying to do this on two sides of the coin, one militarily, and the other one mafia diplomatically, if such a thing exists. So I would like to point out that I did point that out. 2, all of this is evidence of weakness, not strength. Meaning this is not a situation of a president being able to go to countries and bully those countries in the way that he would typically do with pretty much every other country. What this is a president who has no cards, to take a phrase or turn a phrase from what Donald Trump was telling Zelensky, has no cards. No, he has no cards, and is looking for cards by which to play. Meaning this is him searching for leverage, searching for relevance. This is not a man with relevance or leverage. This is him finding, looking, digging under every corner that he could get his hands on to try to find something that he can use to get some level of leverage in order to deal with Putin from a position of strength, which means that by definition, you're not dealing with him from a position of strength. You're dealing with him from a position of weakness. I hope you get my point. There's a difference in those things. Everything that Trump is doing up to this point demonstrates what he doesn't have, not what he does have. There's a difference in those things. If he does indeed give Tomahawk missiles to Zelensky, which is, again, a plea for relevance, a plea for leverage, you don't have many of those. There's that. And B, even if you do what Mark is saying you do, you may end up in a world of hurt, meaning you cannot predict the Russian response. And if you can't predict the Russian response, that may be the thing that tips the scale. Meaning Putin may be a diplomat. True. Putin has done everything in his power, bending over backwards in order to prevent a third world war. And this is against recklessness coming out of Europe and coming out of NATO. And while it's true that he has done everything he has to bend over backwards to try to prevent that third world war, if you push him into a corner, he will not have a choice but to respond. As evidence of this is the special military operation. It took Russia, 8 years to get to the point of engaging in a special military operation? But he did it. That's the point I'm trying to make. While he may be a diplomat, while he may look for outs where he doesn't necessarily have to get into these kind of direct military conflicts or, let's say, escalate the war beyond the special military operation and be willing to absorb attacks with the idea that we're winning, we're sticking with the plan, we're not changing our plan for any kind of emotional flare-up, we're sticking with the plan since the plan is working. If you push him into a corner, he will not have a choice but to respond. Now, whether Trump gets that, whether he realizes that, whether the people who are around Donald Trump are telling him that, they're probably not, especially if they indeed want to somehow escalate the war or they believe that Putin's pragmatism is effectively weakness and that they can effectively skate, that he would remain pragmatic. He will have generals, he would have media, he would have Russians screaming for blood. And while he may be pragmatic, he may also listen to that cry and scream for blood. Be very careful the way you push him. If Putin was the guy that they say he is, meaning that the US media say he is, I have a hard time believing they would be testing him in this way. But who knows? Trump has said that he wants to have a conversation with Putin, and he apparently will tell him about the bluff, about the missiles, in which case Putin will probably tell him his response if he does that. Very politely. Now, Trump has said himself that Putin is always very polite in these conversations. But I think what you're saying is a president that's effectively flailing. He ran with this idea that he was going to somehow end the war, that A, he didn't understand, B, he didn't understand diplomacy in the way that the Russians dealt with it, C, he had this American exceptionalist mindset, this hubris that comes along almost like the nuclear codes with being president of the United States. And within that fog of hubris and delusion, he believed, well, I'll just have a conversation with Putin, Vladimir, as I like to call him. We'll just talk. We'll just have a conversation. And I'll get him to do, oh my God, he told me no. He told me to go F myself. Politely. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know why this is taking place. And the problem that the United States is having, and frankly, not just with Russia, with China also, and on some level even with India, is that we've gotten so accustomed to being able to have this mindset that we can direct events around the world, that we can tell countries what they should and shouldn't do, that we can exert some level of leverage, whether economic or, for that matter, kinetic, that they will listen, they will shiver in their boots, and they will somehow respond to something that we're effectively telling them to do. Whereas now you're dealing with equals. You're dealing with countries that are not taking a lesson from you, that you can't do anything in real terms about, whether it's militarily in Russia's case, unless you just want to go to nuclear war, or economically in China's case, who at this point seems like the one that knocks, as opposed to the US that is actually playing catch up in regards to something that China has effectively done dealing with the chip issue. I'm sorry, rare earths. My point is that we're in a new norm. This is a new world. And just kind of like a kid having to deal with a new school and the rules of that new school, the US is going to have to learn that this is a new world, that these countries are not necessarily going to accept the lesson. Yeah, you may get Indonesia's president saying, hey, can I speak to your kid? Hashtag for reasons. Reasons I don't want to disclose here, but I want to talk to your kid. Or somebody telling Joe Biden, hey, can I speak to Hunter? Or somebody telling Hillary Clinton, hey, can I speak to the Clinton Foundation? I hope you get my point. But that's not what's happening right now. What you're getting, even with Putin being differential, is not one budge, one iota in regards to saying, this is what we want. Here's the surrender document that we need you to sign. And over again, that same document is being presented with the caveat, if you wait, there will be additional items associated with this document, meaning there'll be new territories. Sign it now to get the best deal. If not, we can have this conversation in 6 months, in which case there will be more territories that are added to this document. It is a surrender document. The document is not going to change. Or what do you get China, who's just saying F off? Just Xi Jinping just, that's all. He just sends a text message to Trump. Pew. He's like, I think that guy just sent me a middle finger. And another video comes in, another middle finger. The US is going to have to get accustomed to this. And you're going to have to get accustomed to dealing with countries, not as vassals in the way that you can embarrass and humiliate Europe or some of these other countries, but on some level as equals. And Donald Trump seems to be completely and radically incapable of doing so, and is dealing with a bit of ontological shock at the prospect of having to deal with a country on even terms. He seems incapable of doing it. So what is he trying to do? He goes back to his default. I need to get leverage. How do I get leverage? Oh, let me go after the oil industry. Let me go after countries diplomatically to try to get them to not use Russian energy. Let me do blah, 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 none of which is working, because this is existential from the Russian point of view. The other part to that is that the United States, under normal circumstances, and it's somewhat fascinating, doesn't typically care. And herein, again, lies one of the problems. They don't care about why a process is taking place. They don't care why a crisis is going on, why a war is taking place, why a country did X or Y, the objectives of a particular country, the values of a particular country. We don't care. We're hegemon. We don't need to care. We need you to bend according to our will. It's kind of like a cop, where you're trying to explain something to a cop. The cop doesn't care. He doesn't care. It's like, you have cancer, you need to get, I don't care. You have an appendix rupture, I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. Get in the back seat, or I'm going to beat you to death and kill you. That's the way cops act. That's the way hegemons act. They don't care about the reason this conflict is taking place. They don't care about the historical context. Donald Trump is not going to understand Putin taking generals to the grave of these Catherine the Great. He's not going to get that. That's too subtle for him. He's not going to know the history of that stuff where he could put two and two together. He was just going to be like, oh, Putin took him to the grave. That's as far as it goes. Unless you put it in a coloring book, unless you put very bright pictures. And even then, he may have a hard time grasping what is taking place. I'm trying to point out that for all intents and purposes, it is typically the hegemon's purview to not give a shit about the events that are happening in the world in the context of why they're happening. We have objectives, we have agendas, and we have things that we want to accomplish. That's it. That doesn't work in this. I'm saying this is an environment that doesn't work in this situation. Do you honestly believe that the United States cared about the context of Gaza and Israel? No, we had objectives that we wanted to accomplish. We pushed objectives. Do you think the US honestly cares about picking a random fire around the globe? We have objectives that we want to accomplish, and we're pushed to accomplish those objectives. Historical context and those things matter less, or they matter only insofar as for us to accomplish whatever that particular objective is. If there's a group that is in opposition to the government, hey, great. They're fascists, we don't care. They're perfectly fine. Al-Qaeda needs to overthrow Syria, fair enough. Give that guy a gun, let the guy do what he needs to do. Hey, do you care that they're ISIS and they were killing Americans? Nope, don't care one iota. If we need to give kill squads to South America, give them a gun, give them money, let them do what they do. We accomplish our objectives. Do you care what was taking place on the ground in regards to the people being harmed? We do not. We do not. You get decades of that. And now you've hit your head on a situation as hard as I hit my head, if not harder, where you can't do that. Where in order to actually try to get a deal, by the way, that you can't accept, but in order to get that deal, you would have to understand the context, the Russian context, and how they see it, especially in the context of the way they see it as being existential. If you can't get that, then you will never get a deal on this. Hence, you won't get a deal on this. I hope you get my point. This is a new norm. This is the US approaching something that it doesn't have to typically approach. And that is countries telling it to F off. And not just F off from a position of weakness. This is not like Vietnam, where you go and you murder a bunch of Vietnamese and you get kicked out of the country. This is not even like Afghanistan, where you be somewhere for 20 years, and then you get kicked out and evicted out of the country. This is not that. This is you losing on a massive fucking scale in front of the entirety of the world, where the entire world can see that Russia stood up against all of Europe and the US and won. Now, the problem is that you have to deal with them on equal terms. And the problem is that you don't know how to do it. That's an issue. Hence, the war will continue. And whether Trump realizes it or not, there's a lot of reporting that says part of the reason that Trump just didn't walk is because Trump didn't want to get blamed for Ukraine. I think that's partially true. I think part of it is he holds Europe in contempt. And maybe he did at one point thought, well, I'll just walk. This is not my war. But the problem is he didn't tell the public that he was going to walk. He told the public he was going to get a deal. And he told them something that he was completely and entirely incapable of effectively doing. So your only other option is to walk, which he doesn't want to accept blame. And you would get people screaming in his ears, screaming in the political space, screaming in the blob, in which case Donald Trump, being a weak leader, doesn't have the capability of doing that either. Whether he realizes it or not, at some point, Ukraine will fall. And Ukraine will fall on his watch. And whether you get blamed for losing the war from walking, or whether you get blamed from losing the war several years later when it is clearly and obviously your war, which one is worse? As for China, China is the one that knocks. The amount of trade that the United States has with China is what, like 15%? That's like one city in China. Put it in context. They have been maneuvering. Obviously, it would hurt in the short term, but they have been maneuvering to be able to do without, especially since that first term where Donald Trump effectively went after China, in which case you would imagine a conscious, rational country will be prepared for the second time that same person comes in office and tries to do the same shit over again. China didn't bring out the rare earth thing out of the blue. The US had been salami slicing the deal that they made back, several months ago, in which case, finally, China responded. And of course, because you have a country of psychopaths and liars, the response is, oh my God, I can't believe China just did this. They're attacking the world. I can't believe they're doing this. Yes, they're dishonest. That dishonesty is for public consumption because obviously, Global South, and at the very least, the countries in China, the states in China, they don't buy that nonsense. This is a new norm. This is a teaching moment. That teaching moment is going to get very choppy, to put it mildly. What do I mean by choppy? I'm trying to think of the exact word for it. I always say the word. Rising power, established power. Yeah, I always get the word wrong, so I'm not even going to try to say it. But this rising power thing is not just individual states. This is not Austrian-Hungarian Empire going after Serbia and trying to teach Serbia a lesson. This is happening on a different scale. This is blocks of countries: China, Iran, India, Russia, etc. The United States, Europe, can add in Japan, give or take, depending upon whether or not they're pissed off at the economic stuff that's going on. You have blocks of countries. You can really get rid of some of the other ones and just end up with India, China, Russia, the US, and Europe, with the US being the main driver in this. And the US either having to escalate in an actual trade war, which we're in now, where the US will either have to back down from the trade war or escalate that trade war, with China saying, we don't give a shit. We're in this. We're in this till the wheels fall off. We've been here for 5,000 years. We'll be here for 5,000 more when you, as an upstart, vanish into the history of time. These are two crises that the U.S. has started, initiated, and is now not necessarily all that clear on how to extricate itself from. But it will learn. It will learn. Hopefully, the rest of the world will be here after it does. I'll leave it at that. We have chats. Let's go to chats. Mr. Riffley, someone would eventually challenge Trump in the moment, and that would be really interesting. Trump, Biden with a fake tan at this point. Yeah, I just don't know who. I mean, look, most of the world leaders are diplomats. And I would tell you, I watched Joe Biden get challenged at Summit of the Americas. My company sent me to California to cover Summit of Americas. California, no offense, has to be one of the dirtiest states I've been in. I'm sorry, it's just true. I saw my first crack needle in California. There's that. They're homeless in DC. I suppose they're homeless everywhere, but in California, it's just endemic. And you have this Democratic government with a supermajority, and this is Democratic rule. Okay, that's humiliating, right? You're supposed to be the left-leaning aspect of the political space. You're supposed to care about the poor and the sick and the infirmed and the blah, 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 blah. And what you end up with are grimy streets, taxes that are insane with poor governance, and crackheads roaming the streets like they're vampires. I'm saying, and yeah, that's a detour. I'm sorry. I didn't hate California. I had strange moments there, but I didn't hate it. I was smoking a cigarette at the time. I remember a woman came up and she was like, "Hey, can I get a drag off your cigarette?" It shocked me. And in the moment when I'm shocked at something, I don't necessarily, your brain doesn't click in, especially since she's attractive. Let her get a drag. She sits there. She looks at me. She gives it back. She's like, "Thank you very much." Now, I forget who I was talking to. It was like, "Did you smoke a cigarette after?" I was like, "Yes, I did." It's like, that random chick could have had something. It's an interesting city or interesting state. But democratic governance is just wild. I remember I was at the Summit of Americas. I'm watching Joe Biden with Kamala Harris. I think Kamala Harris was there. And one world leader after the next puts a knife in Joe Biden to his face. Their issue was that Venezuela and Nicaragua wasn't invited to the Summit of Americas. And their thing was like, how are you having this without those states? I think Cuba wasn't invited either. And one world leader after the next stood up there, looked Joe Biden directly in the face, and put a knife in him. I haven't seen that happen to Trump yet. Will it happen? I don't know. Many of these world leaders seem to be intimidated by Trump and have come to the conclusion that the better way to deal with Trump is just to bribe him. So, I don't know. Joe Biden had no fear of. It's like an old man that's obviously not right in the head. Jamal, hope your noggin back is feeling better. Thank you, Charles. I'm sorry. Thank you, Kevin. Now I am in pain. The head bump was bad. The back stuff is worse. And I think I damaged something. But it's one of those things you can't really do anything about. You just kind of give it time to heal. I have 10 days to heal before I have to get my luggage and everything else out of here. So hopefully it heals by then. Hi, Pie. Adric, hi, Pie. Jamal Thomas Palin, pain relief. Oh, thank you, Adric. Thank you. I appreciate it, man. I do appreciate it. And by the way, like the show, share the show if you dig the content. Okay, I don't know what that was about. StreamYard just cut off. Just cut off all at once. Oh, I think I was saying thank you. Hey, Adrian, thank you for that, man. Thank you for that. It was, I don't know what happened. I know, look, I have low blood pressure under normal circumstances. And usually you just manage it. It's like you can't really do anything about it. I stood up too fast. And in standing up, there's usually a time frame. This is too much information, but there's usually a time frame by which you are aware that your pressure is dropping. And you can kind of get this kind of cognitive measurement of how fast it's dropping. I don't know how to measure that. Let's say like if you had X number of increments every millisecond. Well, you can get a general calculation of how fast it's going down and how fast the pixelation in your eyes and everything else is going down. And you can still function because you have this initial thought of something that you're doing. And you just continue to do that thing until all of that stuff comes back to normal. That is how it typically works when your measurement is correct. There are times, however, where that measurement is wrong. And it happens too fast before you have a conscious recollection of even being able to make that measurement. And I woke up on the floor. And you lay there for a bit and be like, oh, what the fuck? Check, make sure nothing is broken. It's like, all right, does anything feel broken? Can I move? Oh, my head, this huge lump, almost like a cartoon, comes up the back of my head. It could have been worse. Could have been in the street. Could have been in front of somebody. And then at that point, you're thinking like, all right, be less of yourself and go get checked out. Don't just blow the shit off. At least get checked out. But everything's fine. I paid $13 for my medical exam. That is including pain medication, x-ray, doctor's visit, etc. $13. $13. Just amazing. Just amazing. You got a fall emergency alarm. I do not have a fall emergency alarm. I'm just the man. Just the man. Drag my ass up and keep it moving. Typically, there's not a fall issue. I mean, I fell in Albania, but that was different. That was me running for a cab and falling off of a cliff. Yes, it was kind of a cliff. Albania is the way the apartment was set up. They had kind of a step, but then the step gets bigger and bigger and bigger the further back you go. My cab was leaving. I was trying to reach my cab. And so, you kind of run for your cab, missing the fact that that step is no longer a step. The step is a cliff. And I slammed into the concrete. And it's always that moment when it happens where it takes a while for you to figure out what just happened. It's like you're laying on the ground. It's like, oh, fuck. I had like bleeding and shit like that. I banged up my arm, sprained my wrist. Shit happens. You get up, keep it moving. There's nothing else you can do. You will heal typically. And if you don't, oh well. I mean, everybody dies, right? I'm trying to think, is there any other story I want to hit before we call this a day? I guess I can cut the last bit about a search for, I don't know, what do you even call it? A search for leverage, search for relevance. The dangerous part about that, by the way, is that we end up in a war. That we sleepwalk our way into war. This idea of, well, we're just going to continuously escalate because we're the United States, and damn it, we're going to do it. Or Europe with these delusional ideas of grandeur about their own relevance and their own awesomeness, as opposed to dealing with the grim fact of reality that A, you started a war, and B, you're losing that war, and C, how far are you going to take this and how far are you going to escalate? The other problem that I guess is a significant problem in retrospect, not just for Ukrainians, is the Gaza issue and the Gazification of Ukraine, if you want to call it that. I've argued, and I think I am correct in that argument, that key issue with Gaza, take it out all the 70 years of Israeli occupation, take out the Israeli murders and genocides and everything else. From the standpoint of either Americans or from the standpoint of Europeans, or let's say Russia, China, these other nations, there's always this question of how on earth can the global community watch the ritualistic murder of children every day coming out of Israel? How can we accept that? And they have this comically low number of like 70,000. That number is easily over 100,000. All of those people that are buried under the rubble and everything else. And this sham of an event where this comically absurd president, this troglodyte of a human being who paid for this murder, this ritualistic mass murder over the course of the last year, given weapons, materials, political cover, and everything else. It was the Trump administration that went to make the argument that Israel has the right to starve the population of Gaza. It was the Trump administration, just like it was the Biden administration, that effectively lied and covered the literal genocide and starvation. And then he goes up and says he wants the Nobel Peace Prize. And in this ham-fisted, almost a parody of itself, covering mass murder. What a visual dynamic between the two. Like when Jeff make the point of saying, look, this looks like comic relief. Yeah, it looks like comic relief on top of a murder and a genocide, a mass genocide, with a deal that nobody believes in real terms. That nobody believes in. But why? That's the interesting point. A lot of us, and I got to be honest, I was shocked by the whole thing. Less so now, but obviously shocked when it first took place that we'd be okay with that and watch that, and nobody would necessarily do anything about that. Was from a misunderstanding of what took place in the Second World War. As somebody who is a student of that war, fascinated by that war, and have studied that stuff for years, I came to a wrong assessment. And I think a lot of us came to a wrong assessment. We assumed that this whole phrase of never again, and that part of, let's say, the ire was against the Germans, was that you were literally committing a genocide. You were murdering people. You were making boots out of Jewish hair and shit like that, the medical experiments. These are the things that you were doing. You killed, 30 million Russians, and not all of them were on the battlefield. Many of them were put into concentration camps. You did this in mass. This was wrong. And you explicitly went after destroying Jews and Russians because you considered effectively Bolshevism to be Jewish. That's wrong. We don't like the fact that you did that. The lesson that we got from that was wrong. We took it as part of the ire was the fact that they did that. If Hitler just did that, nobody else would have cared. It was the invasion into other European countries that was the issue. The genocide was something that they just put on top to make it stick and to make it look that much worse. And I think that's the honest truth of the matter is realistic governments or realist governments say, we are not going to go to war with the United States, or we're not going to have a pissing match with the United States over this issue. It sucks. It looks bad. We don't necessarily like it, but we will continue to do business with Israel. We will continue to try to make, deals with the US, and we will go out and grandstand and talk about how bad it is that Israel is committing a genocide. Oh, you need parts for your thing? Here you are. I'm Israel. Oh, you need to buy something from us? Here you are, Israel. And yet they would go out and complain. China would do it in a heartbeat. Russia would go out and complain, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, you would get European states that would try to have a release valve for their countries. I strongly suspect that part and parcel to the reason it happens that way is because there is no lightning rod in the society to tether that society to the issue at hand. The public may not like it. True. The public may feel some kind of way. Very true. The public may protest. Hell, they may even riot once in a while. Very true. But none of that threatens the state. And what you get is a protest. You may even get a riot. You may get people pissed off. You may get people who feel some kind of way. You may get people who say on the polls, I don't like Israel for this. Nope, I do not like this. But what does it do in the material world? Nothing. Yeah, it changes tenor, it changes point of view. And again, you may get people who are very angry about it. If you have something else that takes place, let's say some kind of economic issue, okay, these things may form a lightning rod together, but by itself, there is no feedback mechanism into the population itself short of just having a conscience or short of moral authority. This is not like Vietnam. This is not like the Iraq War. And because it's not like the Iraq War, it doesn't dig as deep in a flesh to bone sense, a lungs to air sense, in the way that you would need it to challenge and threaten the integrity of the state because of it. Wars do. That is happening somewhere else with people who are, quote unquote, not like us in the way that we our self-conception of ourselves. There's a difference. That difference is part and parcel to the reason why for the Iraq war, yeah, you might have 1 million people that are marching who are pissed off and angry. Well, those are your soldiers. Those are your kids. Those are your mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, etc. What is taking place in Gaza is a conceptual thing that you can see every day. You see these people being murdered and everything else, but that doesn't dig as deep where you would go and fight the police day in and day out because of something that is taking place in the context of the state. It's different. I'm saying the Ukraine thing is the same. Whereas we are putting money into it, yes. We're dumping money, weapons, and everything else, yes. But a dead Ukrainian soldier, we don't give a shit about. Not the public, not the population, not the political class. And so, yeah, Europe and US can grandstand and say, we're going to fight this war for as long as it takes. Because for all intents and purposes, every random blue moon, mercenaries will get murdered that are in from, Britain, France, or the US, or Denmark, or some other rando country. But it's not the same thing as American soldiers coming back in body bags, or British soldiers coming back in body bags, or French soldiers coming back in body bags. If anything, they have a cover story when those people get murdered or when those people get killed in the war. I'm saying because of that feedback mechanism that is typically there in a conflict or a war is absent. Now, if Europe decides to put its troops in, okay, well, fair enough. Those troops get fed to the Russians, and whatever happens in that case, you'll see what the populations and how the populations respond. They either get more pissed off, or they would say, why are they there in the first place? One or the other. But I'm saying up until that point, the same issue on some level with Gaza for the reason why people aren't getting more ensconced and more involved in that issue. It's the same reason that allows Europeans, or for that matter, Americans, to continue and push and push and push. The public is not necessarily engaged. The public doesn't necessarily care. You can have as many dead Ukrainians as you want. The public doesn't give one shit about it, which means that we can continuously sleepwalk our way further and further into a conflict, or for that matter, sleepwalk our way into the point where Ukraine no longer exists. Yeah, both of those things are problematic. We'll see. We are living in interesting times. And I think Mark is right. At various points, there will be hysteria coming out of Europe. When Donbass falls, when Kiev falls, when pick a rando state falls, there will be hysteria. And there will be calls, well, we must do something, we must do something. And the thing that I think I'm concerned most about is a false flag. It's a false flag. A false flag may be the thing that allows entry into the war. So, all right. I am going to call this a day. I am going to say it's always someone else sacrificed for these pogo stickers. Yeah. Dark X. I mean, that's the way you do it these days, right? That's modern war. You try to avoid being involved yourself. And you send somebody else to do it. There's usually some rando with a thick neck that's willing to give them a gun and go kill somebody. All right. I'm going to call this today. At least synesthetics versus evil bastards. Their kids being amputated without anesthesia. Yes. 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 And Donald Trump, that buffoon, is over top of all that being buffoonish with all of these other rando leaders from Europe co-signing this nonsense. Yeah. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. Agreed. You have my full agreement. All right. All right. What is this? The reason I say, what is this? The reason I say, look them up. He wrote a book called Working with the Bible and a Gun. Working with a Bible and a Gun. It sounds like Christian nationalists. It's like holy soldiers, like religious soldiers. Have you emailed Kaya? Kayla's you have to come on the show. I've tried, man. I've tried. I don't think she wants to come on my show. I don't think she wants to come on the show. But she's always welcome. Kayla's, if you're out there, I'm single, boo. I'm single. All right. Y'all have a fantastic rest of your day, okay? You be safe. Yeah, I know. I saw Carney. I saw Carney there. He had a hat mic moment with Trump. I don't know if you saw that, where he leans in and Trump and says, at least you didn't call me. He says, you called me president this time. And Trump was like, something like, oh, or at least you didn't call me governor or something like that. But yeah. Trump seems to bully all of these guys. And they seem to accept that bullying. It just seems, as an American, it just seems weird. It just seems humiliating. Are we off to a wider European war? Mark thinks we are. I mean, look, the issue boils, ask yourself a question. Do you see an off-ramp? Do you see an off-ramp? If you're talking about direct war, then maybe you can see an off-ramp. If you have enough bodies coming back, if you have enough flag-draped coffins coming back. Okay, well, the public is going to feel some kind of way about that. Why are we doing this war? Why is this taking place? Why are these people getting killed? Meaning you will, by definition, like an equal opposite reaction of the public saying this is outrageous. Especially if it's not a war that they don't believe in. Is that happening in Ukraine? Now, up to this point, Ukrainians are coming back in coffins, but Ukraine is not an independent actor. It's not a sovereign state. Ukraine is effectively a state being led and governed by the US and by, say, the UK in some respects. The catch becomes, does Europe accept Ukraine failing? Or does Europe at some point get involved into the war? Meaning, does Europe delusion of grandeur push them, this idealism that's nonsense? But does this at a certain point when Kiev is about to fall, when Donbass falls, is there a point where they say to themselves, if we're going to get involved, we need to do so with the Ukrainian military standing as opposed to the Ukrainian military collapsing? Maybe. If Kiev is about to fall, do they gin up enough screaming and hollering and hysteria where they come up with some justification to get into the war with the full belief that the United States ultimately will back them in doing so? Understand, they may not know as a flat fact, but if you think you have ultimately a blank check from a superpower and a hegemon, that even if the hegemon is saying, we are not going to get involved in this, do they really believe that? Do they really believe that the US political instrument and political institutions, if Europe really did get involved directly in the war with Russia, that the US would just sit it out? We're not in it. You went into Ukraine. Article 5 doesn't apply, buddy. You made that choice. Does the US really take that point of view? Like, this shit is calamity. It really is. I mean, it can go into fuckery. So, Matthew, I don't know. I this is reading tea leaf stuff. But the fact that it's hard to see Europe taking an off-ramp, put it this way, I am very pessimistic for the immediate future. I'm very optimistic for the long term. Whatever that long term means. You all have a fantastic rest of your day. I did not tame the sparrow, Jamal. What? I did not tame the sparrow? It just wasn't afraid of us. Okay, I don't know what that means. I did not tame the sparrow. It just was afraid of us. I don't know if if you're referring to the book, The Sparrow, with the what is it? Emilio finds a. Maybe we should do book reviews on this channel. Maybe we should do book reviews. The Sparrow is a disturbing book, but I don't think you're talking about the book. I think you're talking about something else. It's like the president, what is it? Emilio Jesuit goes to another planet because he hears singing. And he's like, oh my God, those aliens sing so beautifully. They must be a beautiful people. They must be a beautiful race. They must have a beautiful soul. And he gets to the planet and he meets these beings. And they interfere with they interfere with those beings, not realizing that there's another group of beings that has a symbiotic relationship with the beings that they're interfering with. And once those other beings get there, those beings are predators. They're like built as predators. And that priest is effectively taken. That priest is viciously raped. They hobble him, basically ripping the skin off his fingers or whatnot to make him completely dependent upon his master, which is one of these other beings. Yeah, that book is rough. Oh, that book is rough. That book is just fucking rough. Matthew. But if Europe got involved, it gets wrecked in hours. Well, not hours. I mean, it's still a war. I mean, they were saying, at the very least, some of the analysis said that Europe couldn't field a military of like 40, 50,000. Now, if you put that in context, how long is that in the context of the current war? I mean, we're talking about a heavy industrialized war where Russia has been killing and dying for the last 3 years. They're going to get mauled. They're obviously going to get mauled. That's not really the point about them getting mauled. Whoever they send into Ukraine is a tripwire. It's a tripwire. Those people will be sacrificed. If they go in and enforce, at that point, that's a declaration of war. But again, if they are going in, Article 5 doesn't apply. Whether Article 5 applies or not, though, is secondary to the point of whether the U.S. is going to stay out of a war like that. In which case, we're talking about a world war. Yeah, man, it can go into fuckery. They will get mauled. It's not going to be ours, but they will get mauled. We will be in a world of shit when that happens. We will be in a world of shit. All bets will be off. All bets will be off. They'll need Turkey to be sure to pitch in the Black Sea. But that's the other thing, Odessa. I mean, I assumed going back several years ago that Odessa was going to be one of the places that Russia was going to take. A, it's a Russian city. B, when they set that fire there and murdered all of those people. C, it allows them to hobble Ukraine in the context of the Black Sea, where Russia can't be threatened in the context of Ukraine being able to fire missiles and stuff like that. My boss at the time was like, dude, how the hell are they going to get there? Like, how are they going to get to that point? Well, at this point, the Russian plan has been to demilitarize Ukraine. And at the point where they take Donbass, will they have a capability of stopping them from taking Odessa? Odessa has to be on the list of places that they're going to go after at some point. So how does that deal with Turkey, and does Turkey get involved? Again, Article 5 may not apply if indeed it's the Europeans that are the ones that are the aggressors in this, meaning if they enter Ukraine, if they have their coalition of the willing, as they like to call them, then Article 5 doesn't apply. If they create a false flag, that's different, which is why I'm concerned about false flags. Think back to Syria, for example. If you remember the chemical weapons thing, where they were screaming that Assad had chemical weapons, that Assad used the chemical weapons because Obama had said, well, this is a red line. And then you ask the question, well, why would Assad do that? Why on earth would Assad, after taking like 90% of his territory back in coalition with the Russians and the Iranians, why would he need to use chemical weapons when he is obviously has the whip hand? And of course, their response, because he's a bad guy. He's a bad guy. He's a cartoon villain. Now, obviously, the only people that the chemical weapons benefited were the terrorists because their life was coming to an end, meaning they were facing oblivion, they were facing extinction. And the only way that they had any chance in that war was to pull in a larger power into the war on their side. Well, same thing with Ukraine, right? If you are facing oblivion and you're facing extinction, and the Europeans are priming themselves, especially using this idea of false flags and drones and all of this other nonsense that they effectively were using. If a false flag happens, will they call it a false flag? Or will they use it as a pretext? And obviously, Ukraine would have every justification in the world to be the one to do it. But will the United States say, well, it was obviously the Ukrainians that did that. Why would the Russians do that, considering they're about to take the entirety of Ukraine? Will the Europeans say that, considering many of them want to effectively feed their people into the war in the first place, believing that the United States would get involved? No, I'm deeply concerned about a false flag. But those stupid idiots may be willing to do it, even though they're completely unprepared to fight that war. But in their mind, it would be daddy that would assist them in the conflict. And at that point, the question becomes, what does the U.S. do? I don't know. It's obviously fuckery, to put it mildly. Like, we will be in a world of, say, shit and piss at that point. Yes, Europe will get wrecked. Europe will get wrecked. I mean, as soon as you have a war between nuclear powers, Russia will go straight to, no, that's not true. It will not wait for the West losing internet. I don't know if that's true. I mean, does Putin really come across to you as somebody who would immediately go to nukes? I put all the threats aside for the moment. Does that really come across to you as him being that guy? Russia has said that most likely they would absorb, meaning they're not a first strike nation. The U.S. is a first strike nation. If anything, it would probably start a conventional, and it would escalate to nukes. I mean, that's the whole plan with China, right? This notion of escalation. We can fight and win a nuclear war. Well, okay, sure, sure. Russia is a massive landmass. I don't think their first thought will be, let's just nuke Europe. Nor do I think that will be the first thought for Europe or the United States. It will probably be escalatory. The catch becomes, though, the moment that it's clear that one side is losing, then obviously the nuclear thing is going to become louder in regards to, well, we can't lose this war. We can't lose this war. We need to end the world as opposed to lose the war. I mean, yeah, it goes to fuckery. Sleepwalking into a larger conflict. Dangerous, Matthew. Agreed. Also, thanks for what you do. I just do the news, man. Just do the news. I just do the news. I have a particular look, but my bias, for better or for worse, and sometimes it's for the worse, is I just want to know what's true. That's all. And unfortunately, for better or for worse, that penchant of wanting to know what's true puts me on the outs with my own government. Because from my take, there's a real value set that was imbued upon me, strangely enough, within the country to which I found myself or that I was born in. And that value set is not used, nor is that value set accepted. Man sitting on the moon, looking at events. What is the world you want? How do you get that world? And can you get that world through scheming, lying sociopaths that spend all of the money on a wealthy, let's say, faction of the world and hoard those riches from the rest of the world? Well, obviously, you can't get the world that you want like that unless you want a helter-skelter hellscape. Honesty ends wars. I am a firm believer in that. No, I mean, I just try to be straight with my audience. I try to be transparent. And again, for better or for worse. If I'm talking to somebody I like, it's obvious. If I'm talking to somebody I don't like, it's obvious. I tend to be probably far too honest in my takes on things and people, but you know where I stand. I think that's a strength, even though it fucks you sometimes. No, it's a psychological quirk that I just turned into a job. I do appreciate it, though. Thank you. I do my best. All right. Nine Inch Nails Hurt. Hurt is a damn good song by Johnny Cash. Oh, that's so haunting. It's such a haunting song. Yeah, it's such a haunting song. And then he's older. He looks like he had a stroke when he's singing. And so there's a gravity of age that's built into this. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. All right. We're just talking shit at this point. I am going to say like. I am going to say share. I'm going to say subscribe. I'm going to say you can support the content. PayPal, Patreon, Super Chats, buy me a coffee. All of those things are appreciated. All of those things help the content. All of those things help the show. Also, again, thank you for all of your good wishes, all your get well soons, all of those things. You have the deepest appreciation for it. I would do my damnedest to be more careful. That I will promise. Be safe. Be kind to the degree that you can be kind. It was a cover. See, I didn't even know it was a cover. I thought that was his actual song. I mean, it was that good. But there are a few people who do covers like that. What is that woman's name? Aurora. She does the, what is his name? David Bowie cover. What is the name of that song? It's so good. She does it so good. She does it better than David Bowie. Life on Mars. Life on Mars. Life on Mars. God, she does that song so well. Yeah, she does that song extraordinarily well. There's a part in that song where she was like, sailors are beating up the wrong guy. She says, oh man, look at those cavemen go. And you think to yourself, like, look, I'm a sucker for art, right? Especially when it's there is math. So 2 + 2 is 4, those type of things. There are very small things that you can put in the context of life into logic boxes, if that makes sense. Like, obviously, if you're playing chess, but even with chess, there are positions that are unclear. And that is 64 squares. That is a dumbed down version of life. And even in that, you get positions that are just unclear. We have no idea which one is correct in this. We think this is right, but we don't know. In which case, you can get people playing either color of an opening because the opening is unclear. What science does in regards to physics is such a tiny, tiny portion of life. Much of life is so intangible and you don't even know what it means until you live it. Like, how do you explain what the color blue is like? How do you explain, especially to a person that's blind? How do you explain what it's like to get stuck by a needle? If you've never been stuck by a needle, you would never get those things right in your explanation. But when a person experiences it, like, oh, okay, now I get it. Life has to be lived to be understood. Just as a rule, no amount of verbal explanation will ever explain anything to anybody about life, which is the reason why people tend to use comparisons to try to get those things across, because you can never really hit it with words directly. Best point in the world will miss it. Fuck it up. Songs like that are putting these kind of contextual events. It's fascinating to me. Life on Mars. Like, you know, Mars, planet of war and everything else. You have sailors who are beating shit out of a guy. It's the wrong guy. Okay, well, that's kind of wild, right? And this is like that's the hook of the song. Sailors are beating up the wrong guy. Oh man, look at those cavemen go. And at some point, it's like, I wonder would they ever really know that's the wrong guy? Like, what would the guy ever know that he's the wrong guy? That is like, he's painting a picture in this, and Bowie has done this on other songs. One of my favorites, Major Tom. What is the thing? Ground Control to Major Tom. There is a movie called, what is the name of that movie? The movie sucked. But the opening scene of that movie has that as an overlay to it. And for me, that is a religious experience. Yeah, that opening segment is a religious experience to me. You effectively have Earth that has started to go into the cosmos. And they're playing Ground Control to Major Tom over top of this event taking place, where the president comes out, gives a speech about we're going into the cosmos, we're extending our hand out to the world, et cetera, et cetera. And what you're seeing are astronauts who are going on space station. And initially, they're like shaking hands with the Chinese, the Russians, the Indians, the Arabs, et cetera, which means you have a world at this point that is effectively in space. And this world has developed some level of world peace and cooperation in going out into space. And then the song is still playing over it. And then you get the first alien contact. And you get an astronaut who goes out, shakes the hand of an alien. And yeah, it's a bit cheesy, but it works in the context of the song. Oh, it's so good. It's blows my mind. But that is a religious experience. It was like a drug watching that thing. Thank you. Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets. The movie sucked. The movie sucked. But the opening scene, priceless. Priceless. The opening scene is priceless. Life on Mars is poignant, arousing pity or sorrow, tragedy. Like, yes, song for 4K. Yes. Yes. It is the way I've heard Boy sing it. I've heard Aurora sings it. Aurora's better at singing it. No shade on Boy. Ground Control to Major Tom is fucking awesome. But on that one, she hasn't beat. And yeah, it's very melancholy. Like, it's very yeah, it's melancholy. It's very like strange. It's given this portrait of life, this encapsulation. Life on Mars. Like, look at these cavemen go. It's like they're beating the shit out of the wrong guy. It's like, Jesus, man. That is a good movie. I'm a science fiction nut. I am a science fiction nut too. That movie sucked. I'm sorry, Tom. That movie sucked. I think the movie sucked, Tom. Look, the actors didn't have any chemistry. It was a beautiful movie. Don't get me wrong. Visually, it is gorgeous. It is an impressive movie visually. Yeah, it's a very beautiful movie, but the characters had no. Have you think on Star Trek, for example, when you look at Riker and Troy, chemistry, like, it's there. Like, even when they weren't a thing, even when they weren't an item, it was there. It was this thing working behind the scenes in the way that you knew there was something there. They had chemistry with one another that jumped off the page in regards to when you're watching it. And so when they finally at some point get together, it makes sense to you. Well, obviously they're together. They've had this chemistry when they were on the ship for all of these years. It just seems to fit. Those two characters had no chemistry in that movie. They had none. They had none. The creator was good. The creator was okay. It was morbid, but it was okay. I like the actor in that. That guy's a fantastic actor. The one that played in, what is the Christopher Nolan one? It was one of my favorite movies. It'll come to me in a moment. Where they were going back in time. God, I love that movie. Love that film. Love that film. By the way, I asked Kabbalah. Kabbalah is really into sci-fi also. And I was like, hey, Kabbalah, Tenet, thank you. My audience always knows. Thank you. Tenet is fantastic film. Fan-fucking-tastic film. Fantastic film. Just mind-blowing film. Memento is also good. The way Tenet opens is one of the most badass openings I think I've ever seen in a movie, maybe short of Matrix, in the way that what's her name dives through that window. The soundtrack, the military maneuvers as they're going and trying to rescue. Oh, it's so good. Oh, you're gonna get me wilding out over the movies. And then when they how do you know what you are until you test it, right? Now, the problem is the moment that you test it, you may end your life in the process of being tested. So you're kind of problematic in regards to testing somebody. But they tested him by having him getting captured and ripping out the teeth out of his mouth just to make sure he wouldn't break. Oh, what the fuck? Jesus, man. Jesus. That is hardcore. Now, maybe we should consider them book reviews. There are a few that I am in love with. And I'm always looking for more books. I tend to do sci-fi more than anything else because it kind of blows my mind. And I guess we can add movies. But I feel like there needs to be another channel. I don't feel like that can be under this channel. Have you seen Peacemaker with George Clooney? I think it's a future Ukrainian coming to America. Peacemaker with George Clooney. I think you're trying to say Clooney. I think you said Clooney. Well, I thought Peacemaker was the Marvel or the DC thing. I can't think of the guy's name, but the one with the helmet fell through a different dimension or something. What was the Myers-Briggs test that Carl Gustav Jung made in well, I thought it was called Myers-Briggs. I thought that was the name of the test. That is the name of the test, Myers-Briggs. How about Paranormal UFO Show? So I have plenty of interviews with people who are in the UFO community. What is his name? Lou Elizondo, Nick Pope, Grant Cameron. Oh God, man, I have several. I used to cover UFOs for my network. I used to be the UFO correspondent for the network. I was more into Space Brother back then. I'm less into Space Brother right now. FX, you can pass, but it is real. As a flat fact, it is real. It is a real thing. The UFO thing, if you're into politics, the UFO thing takes a different character. It's a different tint than people who are not in the UFO thing. For example, I used to be very new agey when I was a kid, when I was younger. OBEs, remote viewing, contact spirit guides. Oh, I used to be all in. There is a psi phenomena that is a real thing. If you start there and you transition to UFO content, if they didn't say UFOs, you would know the difference. There's an overlap in the way that content works, that if you didn't transition from one to the other, you would never know. And you can transition either way. It's a very weird overlap that those two things take place. Meaning there's a nuts and bolts component to it. And then there's a psi component associated with it. The government, especially Lou Elizondo when he first came out, made a very specific objective of talking about tech. Meaning, my thing to Lou was, yeah, Lou, but who gives a shit about the tech? What's in the craft? Right? Like, meaning Lou's like, well, we need to ascertain intent and so forth. How do you ascertain intent without knowing what the fuck is in the craft. Like, it's not like the craft is just doing its own thing. Even if it's remotely guided, even if it's an AI associated, something built it, it didn't build itself. There's some intent that is working on it. In order for you to find the intent, you need to know why it's there, who put it there, who's in it, etc. But they didn't want to do that because they thought they would freak the public out. I think that's weird, but okay, whatever. Simultaneously with ATIP project was also a project where they were studying paranormal phenomena, AWOS. So they were at Skinwalker Ranch and they were doing all of these scientific studies. I mean, they had a team of scientists, like 50 different scientists, or a team of like 50 scientists studying bizarre phenomena like ghosts, portals, just random shit, because Skinwalker Ranch was apparently haunted. Both of these things were taking place side by side because they thought understanding one would give context to the other because of the phenomena that people were experiencing with the UFO stuff. It's strange. All right, so there are some people that are in the Space Brother camp. And I think I used to be in the Space Brother camp. I am not in the Space Brother camp. People who are politically oriented should eat the subject up. Oh, they should eat the subject up. The reason why I say they should eat the subject up is because it is fraught with politics. Think of, for the moment, your black budget. Meaning, think of your world and the way the world operates. Think of your political figures in your world. Think of your world leaders. Do you invest them with integrity, honesty, rational thought in the way that they operate in the larger world? Do you think they're honest and generous as human beings? Do you think they're truthful in the way that they engage the planet? Do you think Trump is truthful and honest and a good person? Do you think Trump is going to heaven? I hope you get my point, right? All of these people are monsters for the most part. All of these people mostly are sociopaths. And especially when you're talking about the West, they have very specific objectives that they want to accomplish. Honesty is not a hedge for them to accomplish their objectives. Getting people killed is not a hedge for them to accomplish their objectives. They are psychopaths. They're sociopaths in the truest sense of the word. Look at what they're doing in Ukraine. They got millions of people killed. For what? Because they believe that they're elitists and that they're better than the other people on the planet. Rules-based order, right? What does that mean if not that? All right. What does it mean when your government is engaged in a cover-up, and a cover-up that has gone back 70, 80 years? It's not my opinion. It is a flat fact. The documentation bears this out. And no, I don't have the documentation on me, but anybody who's studied this issue, it is clear as day that the US government was intimately involved in the subject matter and intimately involved in covering the subject matter up. It's a flat fact. The things that we've seen, meaning even the craft that were released, the Tic Tac, for example, take out every other thing, and there are plenty of other videos. A craft seems to be coming out the water, meaning the people on a boat see the water bubbling and rolling. There's that. Headquarters somewhere gets a radar ping, and with that radar ping, they send fighter jets, Commander Fraser, Dietrich, both of which have winged people in those planes. They fly to the area, and what they see is a Tic Tac. They look at it. Fravor, who was flying on 9/11, after the jets hit, so the guy has unimpeachable credentials, doesn't know what he's looking at. He has no idea what he's saying. And you can look into the testimony. They come on and explain it themselves. And him and Dietrich are flying around this, what seems to be a Tic Tac. Fravor says, I'm going to go in on it. So he tries to go in on the thing. In an instant, it takes off, almost in a split second. It ends up within a split second, and all of this is on radar, where Fravor is supposed to go after the fact. So it goes to his endpoint location that he's supposed to go to, I guess, in case of emergency or case if anything goes wrong. So it effectively plucks something out of his mind and goes to that location in advance. All right, Fravor and Dietrich have no idea what the fuck just happened. Now, the ship obviously has video. Fravor saw it. Dietrich saw it. It's on radar. This case by itself is, I only need one. And if I had to pick one, it's this case. So it's voluminous in regards to the information. And the people who are dictating this are unimpeachable. They are not going to give you the radar data and everything else because hashtag reasons. But part of what they noticed was the speed at which this thing was able to move without any kind of notion of propulsions and anything else was to the tune of tens of thousands of miles an hour. Okay, you got to deal with that. Like, how do you, as let's say the Department of National Intelligence Agency, or whatever it's called, the DIA, Department of Intelligence Agency, the Director of National Intelligence, the Office of the Director of the National Intelligence. How do you, as the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, come out with a report? And in that report, you point out, these are real objects. It's not interdimensional fish. We need more research on it. They have been showing flight characteristics and everything else. And we need to get rid of this kind of quote unquote giggle factor because we actually need more research into this. This is a problem. It's going in our airspace and we don't know what it is. And then you leave it at that. How do you do that? How do you, as US military, who gets $1 trillion a year, says there's something in our space, but we have no idea what that thing is that's in our airspace. But don't worry, it's not a big deal. That's weird. And when you're seeing video footage and things that are coming out, even the videos that the Pentagon ultimately ended up putting out, or Pentagon put out redos of the videos, you have to explain that. That's bizarre. One of two things is true. It's either us or it's not us. Both of those things are rather astonishing. If it's us, then there is some aspect of us that is separate from our traditional government in the way that we understand it, meaning beyond governmental control. Because keep in mind, one of the things that Schumer and many of these people in Congress were doing was like, we don't have access to this. All right, how do we get access? Now, what the government does often is to give it to private enterprise. That way, Freedom of Information Act doesn't apply. So if Lockheed Martin has some level of technology that these guys have dredged up out of the desert somewhere or from a crash site, if you put in for Freedom of Information Act, you don't have access to that. The government said, we have no idea what this is. We don't know what you're asking for. Sorry, there's nothing in our records. Because there may be a black budget project, or there may be a, what do they call those things? Special access project, where you're engaging with it, but it's not on the books. And you can have a situation where your subordinate is read in and you are not. And so from the standpoint of the government, when they're looking at it, they're like, we don't have access. We're unaware of these projects. And so what does Schumer do? Schumer says, fair enough. We are going to pass legislation that makes it illegal for any company that has access to this and anybody that knows anything about it that doesn't turn it in. Well, obviously, elements that are in the pockets of some of these companies got active and put the kibosh on that and watered down the National Defense Authorization Act as they were pushing hard to effectively get more clarity on this. Effectively, this shit is not passing with that in it. And it's like, well, what's your issue? If this isn't real, what does it matter? They wanted to use eminent domain laws to bring this in the auspices of the government, basically bring it into the light of day as apparently have it into the black. I'm saying, do you believe that your political leaders are trustworthy? And if you do not, and you think these people are sociopaths or psychopaths, then you have something that is completely in the black. And whether the president knows or not is almost, who knows, right? The president may be read in, the president may not be read in. It's very possible that all of the secrecy is through executive order. Meaning it's very possible that there's no laws on the books that are controlling this. This may be controlled through the president, where the president makes the choice of saying, yep, they're not going to hear about this. We don't know. how the secrecy and how the structure of that secrecy is effectively managed. It may be rogue projects that are taking place that just kind of go on. We have no idea, because all of the stuff is effectively in the black. My point is this. Either way you look at it, there's an element of the US government that is directly involved in this program, or in this keeping this secrecy. And you have projects from various countries, not just the United States, Russia, China. They also have their own projects on this stuff. In fact, a guy contacted me about China's UFO program recently. He wanted to do an interview. Anything that you will be told will be coming out of CIA, NSA, DIA, and all of these alphabet intel agencies, or the US military, or the Pentagon. These will be the vectors of information being relayed to the American public. Do you trust these agencies as being honest, honorable, trustworthy, truthful, etc.? Meaning these agencies live in the shadows. And when you think of the people who they've put out in order to have conversations about this stuff, well, obviously there are things that these people can't necessarily tell. And Lou is a counterintelligence officer, for fuck's sake. How do you know that what they're saying is honest when these are the same organizations that have done everything in their power to A, keep this stuff a secret, and B, are responsible for some of the most disgusting, degenerate behaviors on this planet? These are the people that are going to relay information to you about what is taking place that is entirely in the black, and that you would only have the word for it. That's terrifying. That's terrifying. I'm sorry, that is the stuff of nightmares. The idea that it's the CIA that is effectively going to be the vector by which you get information and data, and you have to just trust and believe that what they're telling you is true. Is that really where you want to be? That shit's terrifying. That shit is terrifying. I'm not saying as a flat fact that these guys are lying, but I am saying that there's no way for you to know one way or the other. There are people who are contactees. There are people who are doing remote viewing and stuff like that. Let's say Ingo Swann, Joe McMoneagle. There are things that you can verify just through, let's say, for example, Mars. There are all sorts of anomalies on Mars. You don't have to take my word for it. There are pictures of that stuff. Statues, pyramids, the face on Mars. There's obviously a face on Mars. And NASA has a history of degenerating their images, making them worse. So it obfuscates the ability for people to see what's on those things. But those Mars pictures are real. Those things are legit. And Joe McMoneagle ended up they gave him a target. And he talks about civilization. He talks about worship, temples, all this stuff. And when he finally looked, he was like, these people don't quite look human. Well, they weren't human. They were on Mars. And when they point to the sites where you can see them in the record, meaning they have images of the stuff, there are pyramids. There are these things that are actually there. There's a, what is the guy? He's an astrophysicist, I think, that talks about all of these pictures and everything else that he's been seeing on the planet. Some of this stuff you can verify. But if you're talking about like visitations, oh, that's complicated. That shit gets complicated real quick. All right. I think it's the other way around, Jamal. Do you? And I don't think ICE and deport UFOs. I do not think ICE will be deporting UFOs either. Agreed. I treated them wrong. They may have loved me like the rest. She's gone and let me down. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm Sheree. ICE can't deport UFOs. They will have a very hard time deporting those craft. Some of that stuff is terrifying. Like, a thought experiment. If you had a benevolent civilization, completely benevolent, that visited planet Earth, how do you show that benevolence to Earth? How do you do it? Right? Like, how do you do it? Anything you give world leaders, they're going to use against the population, so you can't do it that way. If you expose yourself, they're going to treat you as a target and may even use you to leverage their own populations, probably for some kind of fiscal interest. So you can't really do it that way. You can try to make contact with individuals. That may work on some level. But to what end, right? I mean, they could say Space Brother came and so. But even that, even with a benevolent species, how do you know that what they want is not going to be interpreted as something else? Because from their context, they're benevolent, right? I'm not trying to cause you any harm. By the same token, we have radical differences in value sets that may not meld. Or to go further, the Brookings Institute. When the Brookings Institute was asked, I forget which government commissioned the report. It was the US, but I don't remember which president. But effectively said, look, we are now sending astronauts to Mars and sending these missions out. We need you, as a Brookings Institute, to give an analysis on what would happen if we make contact or if we find something. Now, the Brookings Institute pointed out that, look, with us going to Mars and the moon and so forth, we may find certain, let's say, previous technologies from other civilizations. That may happen. That may be the case. That may be true. They said, we don't believe that we will meet anything in the short term unless they have a technological edge on us where they can meet us. If they indeed meet us, that may create catastrophic changes in our world, either from the standpoint of our civilization being taken over by the value sets of their own civilizations, or just chaos, just utter and entire chaos. This was the assessment of the Brookings Institute. And so when you get an assessment like that, what does the government do in response to that assessment? Do they show that there were previous civilizations? If they get images and pictures of those previous civilizations, do they show and expose that, hey, something does have the capability of being able to get here? And if something does have the capability of being able to get here, you're no longer the apex species in your own view and conception of the world. What does that mean when you have to come and recognize or reconcile that? What does it mean when physics changes? Meaning when the physics that you know of and that you're taught is subordinated to what's obviously a larger context of the universe and reality and what can be done and what can take place. Oh, that is a different animal, man. That is a hard thing to wrap your head around. The moment that the government or some entity, and I mean just like some kind of government or some kind of body or something like that, that it becomes brimingly clear, like in the way that the value of $1 to you when you go and buy something is brimingly clear, like it's flesh to bone, lungs to air. Your reality changes. Abductions, doesn't that immediately come into play? Faster than light, or this ability to go beyond, meaning physics that goes beyond and transcends what we understand to be typical physics. Okay, what does it mean? Psychic function or psi function. Does that come into play? Like all of this stuff immediately pops out that one box. Cattle mutilations, right? Think of all the weird shit that you've come across in Star Trek. Okay, how much of that stuff is real? Is it, what is engagement like? Is there a cabal behind the scenes? All of that stuff just comes out of a box all at once. There's no way to have what they consider to be, what they call it, low level. There's either catastrophic disclosure, I think is what they call it, or low level disclosure, where the thought is, okay, you expose something small, but can you really expose something small on this issue? Yeah. All right, I'm talking about UFOs. So we've gone way beyond the pale on this. I think I said like, share, and subscribe like 30 minutes ago. Yeah, talk about UFOs. I'm going to end this. Because we're way off the reservation on this. I still can't understand how aliens flying through space at high rate of speed, missing all of the tiny dust bits, and managed to crash on Earth. What if they're not flying through space? For one, you're assuming that their propulsion is the same as ours, which obviously it's not. They're not using gas or oil to get from point A to point B, wherever they are. there's B, if they're using some kind of gravitational propulsion with some kind of plasmodic field that's around the craft, then hitting into things, the field or the fact that they're using gravity as a propulsion mechanism may make that unnecessary, meaning they may make it a non-issue. When they are hitting the craft with the radar and the radar is being scattered, okay, well, maybe the radar is being scattered because gravity is being shaped in some fashion where light always moves in a straight line. So when light hits it, it moves around the contours of the ship because of the gravitational change. I have no idea. The other thought is, what if they're not moving through space? Meaning, what if they're not coming from somewhere? What if they're already here? That's the other thing. I asked Lou, I said, Lou, the Tic Tac is a small craft. Certainly, they're not flying that through the cosmos. It's like you're not driving your car to get to Europe from the US. You're going to take a plane. And I said, so where are they coming from? Is there a base? There have been all sorts of reports of bases that are around the globe. Pat Price, look him up. The man is astonishing. Pat Price remote viewed multiple bases that are around the globe and was able to pinpoint exactly where they were. Pat Price, I strongly believe somebody had Pat Price killed, but that's a whole second thing. But it's very possible that they're not coming from somewhere else. They're already here. We have no idea how long they've been here, whatever they is in this context. So I guess my point is that that's one of those things that kind of comes out of that box. There may be infrastructure that's already built in. So imagine if the government says there's an alien base 5 blocks from your house. What the fuck do you think about that? It's just wild. Dark energy, the force that agrees. I don't believe in dark energy. I don't believe in that shit. They not saying it can't be a real thing, but they have no proof of it. I mean, what they are looking at is a mathematical device, not something they've observed. They're looking at math, and they're saying, okay, something is obviously wrong. The matter of the universe is only 5%, and the energy in the universe is, I don't know, whatever that percentage is, like 15%. Where's the rest? Like, there's obviously enough to keep the world from just flinging apart by atoms or whatever. So where's the rest of the mass? In which case they say, well, obviously there has to be something that has these properties, in which case they call those properties dark energy, but that's not observable. That's a mathematical factor. There could be other models of gravity, for example, that gets rid of this idea of dark energy. It's just the prevailing thought so far. But just think, they're like, oh, we don't believe in UFOs, but we believe in dark energy. Okay. All right. Again, I'm going to call this a day. I'm talking about UFOs. This is not where I wanted to be. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. I'm going to say subscribe. I'm going to say you can always support this content through PayPal, Patreon, Super Chat. And look, if you want UFO content, this is shameless, send a Super Chat. If it may be something I consider. I mean, like I said, I used to do UFO content. It's just the world has gotten heavy. And because things have gotten heavy, the focus is just kind of focused on the things that are heavy. But if it's something that you guys enjoy, if it's something that you guys want, hit me with a chat or something. Just ask for it. I will consider it, or I'll consider it. Who are they? Well, that's the other question, right? Who are they? I have no idea. I have no idea. I've told you about my abduction dream. That scared the shit out of me. I am one of those people that it's not enough for me to believe. I want to know. Know is different. Like knowing is different. You can believe anything. Knowing is different. When I was younger, I got heavy into this idea of, well, that's a secondary thought. I started looking up, okay, UFOs, how do you make contact? And I was reading and absorbing everything on how people try to make contact. Meditation. In fact, if you're looking at like Jake Barber and some of these other people now who talked about craft and everything else, meditation, psychic function, all that stuff comes into play. Long story short, I started having anomalies. some of which my ex-wife was around for. But all of this culminated after, let's say, I don't know, about 8 months, maybe a year, into I'm in bed with my ex-wife. I hear something upstairs. I get out of bed and she says, "Hey, what's wrong?" I say, "I hear something upstairs." I get to the door in the bed downstairs, go upstairs, and I hear something coming down the steps. I immediately panic. I'm frozen. I can't move. And look, whether you're in a dream state or not, being frozen is terrifying, especially when you're frozen and you know something is coming. Oh, this is terrifying. I go into full-blown panic. I've never been that terrified in my life. And I scream in my head, "No," in which case all of it breaks down. I wake up in bed, humiliated. I was humiliated because you spend like 9 months wanting something, being driven by wanting something. And then even if it's just in a dream state, you don't know you're in a dream state. And you think you're you, meaning all of my faculties were exactly the same. In fact, I didn't even know I was in a dream state. And woke up terrified. Well, not terrified, I was more humiliated by it than anything else. Everything stops. All weirdness, everything stops. Month later. Because at that point, I was so humiliated by it. I was like, if this happens again, God damn it, keep your shit together. Month later happens again. Exact same dream. Laying in bed, I believe my wife is beside me. At least I believe she was. I hear something upstairs. At this point, I can't move. Like I am just stuck in bed. I can't even get out of bed. I am frozen where I am. And I hear something coming downstairs. I am in a panic. I am in a panic. And I hear something in my head. I thought it was my wife, but obviously it's not my wife because she would be losing her shit. But I hear something in my head effectively saying, "Look, you wanted this. You can't do anything about it. Calm down." And I realized, I was like, well, yeah, that's true. And I tried to keep my shit together, in which case when I am doing something that's freaking me out, let's say bungee jumping, skydiving, or something like that, I talk myself down. It's like, calm down, keep your shit together, keep calm, chill the fuck out. And so that's what I'm doing in my head. I am using all of my powers to keep myself calm. And I hear something break the door sill. Now, at the point where something breaks the door sill, there's something in the room, and there's something moving around the bed. And there's a few people, or a few things. And at that point, I'm no longer terrified. I'm more curious. Like, I am deeply curious. It goes to this radical level of curiosity of, all right, it's here now. Nobody's clawing at me. What the fuck is in the room? And I hear this thing say, he's curious. He wants to know. Now, the moment that my curiosity takes over and the fear goes away, I can move at that point. And I can move just well enough to lift my head up, to try to look around to see what's in the room. And as I lift my head up, there's somebody staring at me. What? An African-American woman who's staring directly at me. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, this is bullshit. This is bullshit. When I woke up, I was proud of myself. I was very proud of myself. Because I was like, you kept your shit together. Yeah, you're freaking out in the beginning, but you chilled the fuck out. You kept your shit together. You encountered the experience. Again, even if it was in my mind, it didn't feel like it was in my mind. I was terrified at the moment. And then everything stopped. It's just everything stopped. All the weirdness, all the stuff that was going through, it just stopped. It was wild. Wait, I thought you were ended. I am ending. Yes, Karen, I'm ending this. I'm ending this. I'm sorry. I'm ending this. I'm sorry. This is the after show, I suppose. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. I'm sorry, it's the pain meds. Pain medication doesn't make me sleepy. It makes me hyper. So that's probably what's going on. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. Go ahead and say subscribe. You guys have a fantastic week. I mean, we still got like 633 people here. We still have like 600 people here. Look, as I said, you can always hit the like button. You can always like, share, subscribe. You can support PayPal, Patreon, Super Chats. Buy me a coffee. Forget the other ones. There's so many of these things at this point. But your help on the show is deeply appreciated. You have my deepest thanks for doing so. You guys make this content what it is, and I thank you for it. So I am for real ending the show. Yeah, I'm okay. Provide life. I'm okay. I'm okay. It'll pass. The pain meds are working now, so but now the shit hurts. Shit just hurts. Like it takes a while, right? And it's like I remember when I was with my ex-girlfriend. She used to live in New York. I drive 6.5 hours after coming from my mom's house. Walk through the snow, ice is everywhere. I get to the door, and it's like fucking around in front of the door, like like shuffling your feet and everything else. And I bust my ass and sprain my leg. It's like you made it all the way to the door, only to mess around and then injure yourself. It felt like that. Yeah, it felt like that. Yes to opiates. Yes to opiates indeed. Yes to opiates indeed. All right, guys. You all have a fantastic rest of your day. I'll see you bright and early tomorrow morning. We have Warwick Powell, who's going to be in the morning. I'm going to hit Dimitri, see if he could join. And we need somebody to talk domestic because there's still no government as we speak. The government is still shut down. Ain't that some shit? And by the way, they're not opening that up anytime soon. There is no incentive to open the government back up. So it will not be open anytime soon. What's going to be interesting when people stop getting their checks, when Social Security stops delivering their checks, when the military stops getting their checks, when all of the functions and the things that the government does stop working, when Air Force, the air thing, traffic controllers, when the TSA, I don't know why those people even show up to work at that point. They should say, fuck it. The government is not going to work. Why should we? Call it a day. You guys be safe, be kind, and I'll see you bright and early in the morning. We'll say I love no government. They can keep it shut down. Patrick, no bullshit. I am so pissed at the U.S. government right now. I feel you on this. But it does things that people require. Like if you're living off a Social Security check and that's your only income, how do you pay rent? How do you buy groceries? How do you do just basic things? Yeah, there's shit that people require. In that sense, yeah, direct democracy doesn't work. At least I don't think it works. Like, think of what you have now. Do you really think that everybody is going to want to make votes on every little thing that comes up? Hey, should we give people $570 instead of $550? And everybody has to vote. You're going to get like 10% of the population voting on those things. All right. I'm going to say like, share, subscribe. I'll see you bright and early tomorrow morning. Be kind to the degree that you can be kind. And be safe all. Have a good one.